It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Wednesday, May 6th, 2026. Thank you for joining me today. Interesting, continually crazy, just one day after another, just obvious. You know, it's this weird situation we've been in for quite a while now, where these things are slapping you in the face obvious, and yet we still have to sort of grapple with the system, the machine, the media apparatus that somehow pretends like it's all not obvious. Now, objectivity is very important, especially when we feel like things are clear. Now, that's an important thing to think about, right? Let's just take something that's proven, whatever that means in today's world, something that is literally proven. You have to ask yourself whether you may be missing something, that there may be some more information that might be added that would change that picture. And, but the point is, there's still something that's proven to you, and it could be added more information that might change it down the line. My point is, when we're in these moments where we can see these things, for example, Trump lying about everything that seems to be happening around Iran, is abstract and frustrating as it may sound, there very well may be something that comes to fruition, or rather becomes obvious, becomes relevant or seen a month from now, that somehow makes what he was doing at least be seen differently, or maybe make sense entirely. I don't think that. That's what I've been, my opinion's been clear the entire time. But the reason I'm even saying that today is because as this gets more and more obvious, it's even more important for us to make sure we check ourselves, to make sure that we're not just, the next post that comes out, we just suddenly start believing what Iran says. We should never be doing that. As much as that's how we get framed by the people who are on, I guess, who blindly take what Trump says at face value and act like we shouldn't be taking what Iran says at face value, even though we're not doing either of that on either side. It's important to not let yourself get lazy, or rather lax with those kind of things. Somebody who's being honest about something every single time for a year straight, you start to go, well, they're probably telling the truth. Now, that's important to do as well. Look at the past, look at the precedents, look at what they've done so far, but still just ask whether they could be wrong today, whether Trump might just be telling the truth this time, as opposed to every other time before it. Now, that's funny. It's not even relevant today, because guess what? He's lying yet again. But I think it's important to check ourselves about that. And I'm saying this today because it was on my mind. It was something that I was going through today and just struggling with how ridiculous it all is. And because it's so obvious, because it seems just so self-evident, I got to sit back and go, like, am I missing something? Is this supposed to be this obvious? And even if it just is what it is, that's still the right process to go through to make sure that we're remaining objective in this ridiculous cartoonish time that we live in. So largely what we're going to talk about today is the Iran developments. So I still think this is very, very important, how it ties in with a lot of other things. And as always, when there's a large event like this, and this is not even debatably, this is an important event to be covering, regardless of whether it's all lies or psychological operations, they're all working together, or whatever we think it is. It's a very huge earth-changing event, for many reasons. So it's important to make sure we keep up on this. Now, we're also going to be talking about a few important stories I want to include in the beginning, that I guess kind of largely relate to the larger topic of corruption, dishonesty, and the partisan game being played to kind of distract, as we've been kind of keeping up on lately more than usual, because I think it's happening more than usual. We're going to touch on a few particular stories within all of that. For example, closing different locations that are supposed to be investigating criminality or fraud, and what they think that speaks to. Talking about specifically an investigation of Senator Louise Lucas, one of the many politicians that I think are equally corrupt across the left-right political spectrum, but how it's being dealt with, I find interesting, and what it's aimed at, I find interesting, and we'll go through this as well. We're going to talk about a Christian Zionist group that is, well, there are many groups we could talk about. In this case, one particular group that is being lobbied directly by the Israeli government that is not divulging that, not registering under the FARA Act, which is what that's for, and directly petitioning people on the Christian right. And there's a lot of this going on, and it is a game of manipulation. We're going to talk about why that's relevant. And of course, an important article, which is not that's the right word, the reporting of the many different locations that have been attacked and destroyed by Iran that has been lied about by our government. Now, Washington Post has a new article that came out showing this, but this information was clear right in the beginning, not necessarily the full breadth of how many they're highlighting here. And we should question their reporting. But it's not new information. We've told you this already. But really to find out that they're reporting based on their investigation that you can confirm for yourself, or at the very least check their information, 228 structures they claim, pieces of equipment, military locations, across the Middle East, United States locations, personnel that have been killed. And we're being lied to about that. It really shows you how much they care about those American lives that they're using and lying about. Or, the alleged pilot they rescued or didn't, or used and didn't get, or did and didn't tell you, or whatever the ridiculous story is around all of that. But we're going to talk about as well the false flags that I think we were discussing at the time. And I do very much think this is how they ended. And I think they failed. I think they just legitimately failed in their effort to do this. You can decide for yourself. As always, I'll present the evidence that I think. I'll give you my opinion on it, and you can decide for yourselves. There was one other point. There's an interesting point I wanted to get into around Fauci and where that seems to go. A couple of different partisan points I wanted to include Fauci, Kash Patel, and some different, failing efforts of him that continue to happen. And I want to start out with pointing out a couple of recent articles, or rather interviews and IMA panels that we did. Largely, there's one other thing I want to get to. I feel like I'm forgetting, but there's a lot to get to today. We'll go through it. And sadly, I think this is, my gut about all of this, just to start off with this, feels like this is, to put it very simply, unless the American people can recognize what really seems to be driving this and at least try to do something about that, more than just what we're doing here, because it does necessitate more than just discussing it, but we have to make sure we keep discussing it and that we keep pointing to it. That's never going to stop being important. But unless we do something about that, and I'm not talking about violence, it comes to a point where I believe Israel will drive this, not necessarily because that's just what they do. I actually do think that is very common practice for them. And I would argue that in some cases would be the reality. But right now, because it feels like a desperate effort. It feels like a last-ditch effort to get this done. And I believe that's why I think Lebanon was sort of included at a time when it felt like it would have been, it was obviously a bad move for them publicly, even though they've always been doing it. And I asked why. And I think it's because they recognize this is possibly the last effort with the awareness about what Israel and Zionism truly are. And so I worry that if we don't capitalize on this awareness, on what we're watching and seeing, and the amount of American people that are finally seeing through this, that may just get kicked over the edge, whatever we want, regardless of what we actually want. And that's kind of a larger point around all this stuff, isn't it? Think that it's against American interests, an America First movement that is sacrificing American interests. It's everywhere you look. Now, before we get into all of that, I want to start with a shout out to the throwaway comment. The person wrote throwaway as their account, which I do similar things when point is people avoid being tracked on internet platforms and so on. So they commented on TLAV and just said they put their name as throwaway. And they simply said, first, just commenting, reporting on point, ahead of the curve as always. Appreciate that. But it said perhaps the Independent Media Alliance could have some occasional sessions on solutions. And I really appreciate them reaching out and asking that. Sometimes that's just what it takes, right? Just, because we've talked about this, we've thought about it, but this person just asked, and at that moment caught me at the right moment, had an opening for a second, reached out to James Corbett, and it all happened from there. And so, it's a funny thing is there's just so many things always going on. If you have an idea, reach out. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but randomly like that, sometimes it just works out. So I reached out to James Corbett and asked him if he was interested in setting up a panel because, James Corbett, Solution Watch, right? And he's one of, I see James and Derek Burrows as two of the most important people in regard to keeping people in the minds of solutions. Now, there is plenty of others doing good work on that. That's just obviously the close to my orbit. But the reality of this, I'll just read what we wrote here. Bringing a panel focused on solutions. Now, as I mentioned, a viewer reached out asking if we could do one like this. And of course, I thought of James, obviously. And he, as in the IMA panel that was done yesterday, I posted on our Substack and site today, he made a point to say that we are going to make this a regular occurrence. So I'm really excited about that in general, because I just like James being involved with all of this. He's one of the founding members of IMA. but that due to the time difference, it tends to be difficult to get him in them. And so this is going to be something he's going to be spearheading. So when he does a solution watch, we're going to basically, maybe not every time, but we're going to be collaborating and making it sort of an IMA panel. And so in this case, the focus was guided by one of James' questions. If you watch his solution watch segments, that's what he essentially does. He takes a question from a comment and addresses it. And this guy got more than his money's worth because we spent basically an hour and a half going through this one question really in depth. So it was a really good conversation. And it was focused on this question. And it was asked, when, if ever, do voluntarists, different than there's voluntarists with a Y versus voluntarists, they're two different words. I said the first one wrong, in fact. Voluntarists, which when you type it out on anywhere, they'll tell you it's misspelled. It's not a word that's very commonly used, but it is different than the other. And it simply means just people who want voluntary exchange between human beings. Anarchism, libertarian, a lot of different things we discussed, different, elements to all of it. We're going to get into the differences right now. But in that to me seems to be what most of the community is focused on as being one of the words that everyone can agree upon. And that it removes some of the differences that cause divisions. But anyway, when, if ever, do anarchists, voluntarists ask the state to solve problems created by the state, right? Like literally everything we're dealing with in the world, or, simply like calling the police to deal with something in front of you, or a larger point, asking the government to solve a problem that they've created, right? But anywhere within that spectrum. And of course, we go on to discuss basically state-backed violence or police enforcement being utilized to solve nonviolent, often trivial personal problems. And a lot of times by people that would otherwise act like that's something that they disagree with, but then use it when it's important for their personal opinions. And this is pertaining to the episode of Solutions Watch. James writes, a listener writes and asks let's read it again, the way he specifically framed it. So it's a great conversation. I really enjoyed this, and I thought we're going to do more of them. There was the IMA members, and then there were some panelists that James invited himself, and it was just a really great conversation. And I hope you'll check it out, and we'll be doing more of them. Oh, and here's James' actual post, and the Odyssey embed is the one that's on that as well as our Substack. On top of that, Derek and I had an interview we did a couple days ago, but it's been other things I had got up in between there, and today was actually perfect for this because of some more information that came out, and I'll point to his tweet in a second. But we interviewed about his important article, the Zampolli-Melania pact allegations, because that's fair, the alleged pact, and its geopolitical implications. Now, I think this is very important, and it gets this conversation, like this itself is very important, just this conversation and looking into this further. But again, reading this, I think this is the larger thing that Derek tried to highlight toward the end of this article that I think speaks to everything we're dealing with, at least according to Ari Menashe. Now it says, basically joining to discuss his article, Zampolli-Melania pact, Amanda Ungaro, Epstein connections, and the leaked phone calls, and why it's relevant to the recent press conference held by Melania Trump. As you saw when she came out and said, I am not connected to Epstein, even though we literally can prove that she is. And it says, we also discussed the major U.S. foreign policy and domestic policy implications of this alleged pact and what it pertains to. What the former senior executive for Israel's Directorate of Military Intelligence, Ari Ben-Menashe, called Israel's metaphorical nuclear bomb, used to compel American politicians to support Israel's political goals. Direct quote, he said, they have photos of Melania with Epstein, Trump isn't the point. Melania is. That's coming directly from Ari Ben-Menashe, former senior executive of Israel's Directorate of Military Intelligence, and saying quite frankly that this is what they have on specifically this administration. And so the idea being that there's a pact between Zampolli, who is the one here, who currently is in Trump's administration and was the last time, and Amanda Ungaro, who claims that she was abused by him as well as people around the Epstein network and is currently calling it out. Here's a book about to come out. So the point is that this guy's saying that the reason they control it. Now think Iran, think Trump embarrassing himself, just as a possible thought. Not that we should just take them at face value. But I think we know there's more to this with what they've done, with the lack of coverage of the Epstein files, with everything that they haven't done important, as well as what they have done, which exposes their criminality and their fraud. No more, really just fraud and criminality like we see left and right. Because right now we do see a higher level in this situation than I think I'm used to seeing in any sense. But coming back to this, Derek wrote, well, now Zampolli is threatening, and this is somebody Derek pointed to doing good work on this, Anthony Andrews, with a cease and desist letter. Why? For speaking about his connections, his first name is Paulo, to Epstein and the talk of pact with Melania. Now, you have to understand, this is something that's not just hyperbole. This has been discussed. It's been acknowledged. Like, Amanda Ungaro is somebody on the inside of this conversation. She was in a relationship with Zampolli. And at the very least, her stating that in reference to the fact that she's claiming that's the case is reportable. But there's much more than that, as you can go through Derek's article, our interview and discussion. Derek does a good job breaking this down. But as what we see in this administration more than ever, sue, deny. Keep sharing his post. He says in my recent article on the situation, he says, I'll be on Redacted today, Derek Rose, talking about the story. And I think this is an important story, and it's getting a lot of attention from the people you might expect, the ones that used to say they cared about the Epstein files. We'll be following up on that. Now, in regard to more criminality and corruption, I just think this is important to highlight. I mean, obviously, this conversation is going to be very divided amongst the political spectrum within the lost two-party illusion because it's about immigration and enforcement. I mean, just a quick side note, it baffles me why, I mean, I shouldn't say it like that, but let's just say for the honest people who, whatever your opinion of it, they feel that immigration, every immigrant should be deported. And look, if they're illegal, that is the law, right? The point, though, is that why those people don't then have an issue, and some of them do. The honest ones, I would argue, or at least the ones that can see it, have an issue with the illegal way they're conducting the operation. But even if it is, well, we had to because Biden did this and now we're stuck. The argument would always still be, but that shall not be infringed, though. Right? America First administration, right? We believe in the Constitution. Like there's no or if or asterisk because pathogen. That's not how that works. And so it kills me that we are in the situation where you can literally, not debatable, watch them violate constitutional rights, execute Americans in the middle of the street. But so the point is, Donald Trump's administration closes the watchdog office for immigration detention abuses. I don't even understand how you can't, this is transparent to me. I mean, now, to be clear, their argument to say it out of the gate is that they're claiming that because of the new funding bill, that it was outside of their control. I'm calling absolute BS on that. This is the article from Huffington Post, read the title already, starts saying the Department of Homeland Security is closing an office responsible for investigating misconduct and abuse in the immigration detention system, according to an internal email to DHS employees obtained by the Huffington Post, which you can look for yourself, and this is not only being covered by them. So for the typical partisan-minded lost people in the conversation and go, you listen to the Huffington Post? No, I don't. It's just a place where we saw it, and it's covered a lot of places, and you can look at the source material if you choose to. The source is important, but the information is what matters, and we can check the information. The reality is there is an email, and this is happening. So it's funny that response often comes up, and it's usually people's efforts to sort of just go, well, I'm going to, stomp my feet and close my eyes and pretend like this isn't happening because that's a platform I'm told to ignore. That's just willful ignorance, even though all these platforms, left and right, will lie to you when they need to. It's up to you to decide, right? It's important to read even the lies to understand what they're trying to do. The office, and that's question everything. It's the only way to traverse that. The office's public-facing website, which advised the families and attorneys of detainees on how to file complaints, was down as of Monday afternoon. Now, that's one side of this, right? Like giving Americans advice on how to traverse this, how to go through this process. So removing that, you could argue any number of things. I would argue that's, why you wouldn't want to help people who are arguably going through the process the way you tell them to speaks for itself, I think. But it says even basic informational websites explaining the office's responsibilities appeared to have taken offline. The email attributed the closure to a lack of funding in the Homeland Security Appropriations Bill. The one that gets billions and billions of dollars, and that ended the recent shutdown. Though the text of that bill does not require the cloure of the office. So that's a lie. But what they're trying to say is essentially because the Democrats got what they wanted, or what, that's the actual argument when you dig into this. When you look at their statements online, the simple reality is they're basically trying to, this is a typical childish juvenile move from this administration. They want this to go away because this office is problematic for them. So they basically try to make it about the Democrats did this by trying to do what they did to us. The only problem is when you look at the facts, that's not even true. But it's easy just to yell it because all this typical people we always point to will repeat what they say without looking even without due diligence. DHS did not shut down the Office of Immigration Detention Ombudsman. Congress did, says the spokesman, who clearly sides with whatever Trump has to say. And it goes on to say that, I mean, let's not forget, guys, these are the exact same people who were telling you that the Democrats were keeping TSA shut down. Even though if you took half a second to look, it was the Trump administration keeping it that way because they wanted them to give what they wanted around the Save America Act. That's all it really was. And so Trump was saying, because they won't give us this, we're not going to let that happen. And because that's them doing this to us, and that's why that's not happening, that's their fault. That becomes, they don't want TSA to be open. It's like, how do you even mentally make sense of that? It's a lie is what that's called, guys. The closure of the OIDO, quote, fits in with a larger strategy here of trying to get people to give up on their immigration cases, which, let's be honest, guys, that's not even secret. They've been openly engaged with these kind of actions. And it says, and give up on their asylum cases, which they're also pushing, by holding out the threat of detention and making sure that the detention will be the most miserable conditions possible. They've basically said that to many degrees. That's exactly what Israel does. And this is Adam of the Washington office in Latin America, and he says, discussing on the dismantling of the office, says if you're trying to make detention as miserable as possible, which again, guys, that's been their plan. That's how they alligator Alcatraz. That's what they did, and they literally emulated exactly what Israel does, acting like these people are. Even though, remember, half these people aren't necessarily criminals. Even look, to be honest about it, most of them were not, and you could prove that. But it's just in a normal, general, objective sense that people go through these processes that aren't criminals, maybe just caught up in certain circumstances, even people that aren't even breaking the immigration law, by the way, and they treat them like they're what they pretend they are. Rapists and murderers and terrorists, as they let all of those people go and send all of the actual terrorists back to El Salvador to help Bukele run the country, apparently. But it says, then you're going to be doing what you do if this process is causing problems for you, and you want detention to be worse, then you're going to do what you can to get rid of the ombudsman's office. Basically, the group that's supposed to make sure that this isn't happening. And this is because that would have been a source of friction for you. I mean, and it is. We know this is because this is the office that's going, hey, people are dying in those locations, and you're not proving anything, or you're deporting people without process. You're not, all of the things that we all know are happening. If you actually are not a blind partisan manipulator and you can understand the provable reality of what the courts have literally proven to us 1,000 times over. And even in their own documentation, Trump's administration admits to, and then they still lie about it publicly because that's how embarrassing this is. So they got rid of the office because it's the office that would actually try to hold them accountable. I mean, there's really no way to misunderstand this. As well as the FBI beginning to investigate the person who exposed Kash Patel for exactly what he is. Now, realize MS Now or The Atlantic or any of these platforms, they lie all the time, guys. These journalists are partisan like anybody else, and we should question them all. They're all in the same category for me, as well as the people we're calling out like Kash and Trump and all the rest of the corporate media and the mainstream alternative media. It's the same thing, in my opinion. They're all dishonest. They're all playing their games. What's crazy to me, though, is you have this example where somebody exposes that Kash Patel does what everybody's admitted he's doing. As we'll get to in a second, what a waterfall of people that know him came out and was like, yep, that's exactly what he does. You can call them liars if you want. The point is that he's suing them because they exposed what he was doing. Or at the very least, you can claim they lied about his drinking. But realize that the case was completely flimsy. If you care to look at the details right when it came out, it was, as I keep showing you, with most of them designed to fail, or at the very least that they're so incompetent they can't put together a real case. And that was pretty embarrassing for him. So apparently, whether that was him pushed into it or he did that and failed, the response is to investigate the journalist, or whatever you want to call the corporate media person who covered the story. Now, look, this is not in a normal sense. I mean, there's no way this is something that would, this is what I'm trying to think of the right way to say this, that it's not confusing. So basically, when you're investigating some of these things, as we'll go through in the article, we're talking about, leaks of classified material. What he's doing is going after a mainstream person who simply reported on something that he found embarrassing. The First Amendment doesn't matter. The idea that and what about the waste of resources and the waste of government? This is so embarrassing. Or we talk about Jimmy Kimmel and Trump just publicly yelling. And we just went over that like 6 months ago with Carr and the idea before that. And everyone tried to defend it like he didn't really say it. Now he just comes out and just bluntly says, get rid of Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, it's insanely obvious these people are not just hypocrites, but like utterly dishonest. The point is they've made up an entire persona that they want you to think they are. And I don't even think they remember what that persona is at this point. So the FBI has launched a criminal leak focusing on an Atlantic magazine journalist who wrote a deeply unflattering account last month of Kash Patel. Two people familiar with the matter said to MS Now. The sources said the so-called insider that investigation is highly unusual. The sources said the so-called insider threat, investigation is highly unusual because it did not stem from a disclosure of classified information and because it focused on leaks to a reporter. But are they leaks? How is it a leak if it's not classified information? It's basically somebody going, Kash Patel's a drunken idiot. Yeah, I can see it. And that's reported as this person told me that about Kash, and now you're investigating them for what? What's the crime here? This is a staggering waste of resources and just, I guess, childish? There's got to be a better word for it. This is somebody at the head of the FBI who is investigating somebody for reporting that he did something silly. And that's what my point was about. Look, there's much more to it than that, by the way, but that's what he's focusing on, the drinking. That's what I said in the first place. That's like the least important part of this to me. The agents involved are part of an insider threats unit based in Huntsville, like a literally specialized FBI unit to insider threats. They said mean things about me. Go get them. Typically, leak investigations look into government officials who may have disclosed state secrets, classified documents. Journalists who receive and publish such information have typically only been involved as potential witnesses. Right. Because you understand, even if it's classified, you're still talking about the person leaking it being the person not the person you give the information to. You remember the WikiLeaks conversation? Washington Post, New York Times, they all posted that information. Assange was in jail for years. And this ridiculous clown is going after the person who published it, not the person who gave me information, because that wouldn't even be a crime, you understand? They're trying to drum this up into some kind of thing where they go after them. And here's what Trump's been doing the entire time. Right now, they're trying to find something on this person. Not that they had something before. It's my opinion. It's everything they're doing. They open this up and they just look for anything. Now, I frankly think that's what we're talking about when it comes to the Congresswoman. Even though I would argue they're probably all criminals. They're all fraud and corrupt and ever trying to manipulate things with their power. Nonetheless, as we get to it in a second, it feels like they're just going after her to try to find something to make a case about Democrats. Now, my point would be, I'm willing to bet you that there's criminality they plainly see, but they don't go after because it's all of their game. Continuing, where were we? The agents involved, it goes on to say, typically the leaks, and then the journalist, Sarah Fitzpatrick, cited 24 anonymous sources. Now, anonymous sources mean nothing to me at this point because we know these platforms often, at least in my opinion, have lied or misrepresented that. Or at the very least, they're being lied to and aren't aware it's just the CIA or the FBI or the White House is pretending, which does happen. Or even like we know about the FBI doing this with their own things where they'll leak something to the media as an anonymous source, and maybe the media doesn't even know that, and then they turn around and go, well, they cite the media report as an impetus for their investigation. It's very corrupt. They do this all the time. And says a detailed story reporting Patel's alcohol consumption and erratic behavior has caused deep concerns among FBI officials. My thing was about when he basically spun out, thought he was going to be fired, and the way he irrationally acted, it demonstrated not just because he might be drunk, but because the guy is an ineffectual, incompetent person. And I think that's the reality here that it showed, is that he's just drifting through this, and everyone around him recognizes that he's not, like, the end point, he's not in control. I don't think many of them are. And I think that's becoming more and more like, was it James Lee that made the case about Hegseth, for example? Each one of these locations, you can see somebody behind them that looks like they actually are the ones making these decisions. I'm not proving that. It's an opinion. But there's a lot of people just considering what we can see. And at the very least, you can see that they don't really know what they're talking about. Patel immediately sued The Atlantic, saying the story contained falsehoods and claimed that he'd been defamed. Well, that's a very different, okay, if you're defamed, then why are you going after them like it's some kind of a classified leak investigation? That's an abuse of power, is what it is. At the very least, you're talking about two separate things. Why would you sue them for defamation while you're about to open an investigation around something much, much more serious? It doesn't make any sense to me. And it feels like if one side of it, like you're just trying to cause a big splashy thing to get people to look away from your absolute dumpster fire of an agenda right now. Or it could be that Kash Patel is just doing this himself because he's this kind of person. Like petty, small. The magazine and Fitzpatrick stood by a reporting saying that they had received additional corroboration after it was published. Who's to say whether that's true or not? But I find it hard to believe it's not, since we can, with our own eyes, see plenty of examples that that's kind of the reality. An investigation could be used by FBI agents to obtain her phone records, run her name and information through FBI databases, and examine her social media contacts. Now, this is somebody that, you know, a mainstream journalist that we tend to see as sort of adversarial. They're a person. I argue we should question anybody. And especially in the mainstream, these people tend to be a little bit more, in my opinion, less trustworthy. But nonetheless, it's a person with rights. Okay. And what you're talking about is opening an investigation into this person and then looking through her phone records, her personal information, her social media and for what? Based on your allegation of something that's yet to be fleshed out. Isn't that a violation of her rights? I would argue that. The government just doesn't have the right to go, I'm accusing you of a thing, and they're just diving through all your personal information. That's what they're doing. And I argue what they're doing is trying to put together a case, or at least trying to find where the people or where the information came from. Which then you're talking about going after people that were, that's going after the sources, and that's a big violation. There is deep concern about the approach among some of the FBI agents assigned to this very matter. The sources speaking on the record said who granted anonymity in order to speak freely about the matter. They said they know they're not supposed to do this. But if they don't go forward, they'll lose their jobs. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Now, that seems like the whole administration. People with integrity, bow out. I'm not going to compromise my principles because you want me to do the thing that you're too afraid to do. So, and so that's when you get people that resign in protest, or the ones that want power and step into place, knowing they're going to look like that's the entire administration right now. And we saw that with the last Comey and Letitia James and Abba and the rest and the guy before him that stepped out of the way. And so the point is that now you got FBI agents in the same situation who know this is illegal or wrong. And they're just, I'm going to do it anyway because I don't want to lose my job. In a statement to MS Now, the Atlantic's editor-in-chief said, we will have further comment when we learn more. If true, this would be outrageous, illegal, and dangerous attack on the free press and the First Amendment. We will defend Sarah and all of our reporters who are subjected to government harassment simply for pursuing the truth. Now, it's certainly possible. That is, I would argue likely that is what is happening right now. Now, why is that, right? Well, even Assange, whether you think that there's more to the story or not, was used to chill free speech. That every other one of them, even with things they can prove, are now going, well, should I? Right? Is Trump going to try to ruin my life? Is Kash Patel going to sue me and dive through my personal information and then something else gets leaked? These are the people we're dealing with, guys. That's my opinion, as always, and I'll always make that clear. But, and honestly, I think it's, anyway, when I'm speaking off the cuff, I think that's pretty clear, but I'll always make a point to say it. So ask why they're doing this. And if you want to read this article as well, the New Republic put this out. Kash Patel's Atlantic lawsuit's already backfiring. Basically, the story goes over all the people and their accounts about this guy being a belligerent and whatever else, and take it for what you will. On top of that, and this one is more indicative, I think, of the larger foreign policy sort of global change. I mean, this is not new in the sense of like forcing foreign leaders to, I guess, put U.S. interest above their own people, or just straight up regime change and putting people in place that they know will be amenable to them instead of their people, or just straight up sell them out entirely, like what's happening in Venezuela or anywhere else. They put someone there, or at least force somebody to accept the reality, and then they just bow to interest of the United States. In this case, Donald Trump blocks visas for Costa Rica's leading newspaper because it broke a sexual abuse scandal, the thing the Republicans used to care about, involving the country's current president, who is also a Trump ally. So perfect, right? So they break a story about Trump's ally that showed the guy's a monster. And instead of going, that guy's a monster, we shouldn't befriend him or work with him would they just keep them out? It actually brings to mind a certain story that seems very relevant right now that I'm sure you've seen more than once. And this is what they always tend to do. Now, the overlap, or rather the similarity between Israeli propaganda, foreign policy, media, just engagement with things around them, and to what the U.S. does today, it's hard to miss.
We have to condemn the atrocities that happen every day to Palestinians in the West Bank. You mentioned sexual violence. I was part of the human rights vetting process for arms going to Israel, and a charity called Defense of Children International Palestine drew our attention at the State Department to the sexual assault, actually the rape of a 13-year-old boy that occurred in an Israeli prison in the Mosque in Jerusalem. We examined these allegations. We believed they were credible. We put them to the government of Israel. And you know what happened the next day? The IDF went into the DCIP offices and removed all their computers and declared them a terrorist entity. I think it is vital that atrocities not happen to anyone, not sexual violations, not any kind of gross violation of human rights. We are looking at a situation where there is so much dehumanification, where people are not seen.
If you haven't looked into that story, we've covered it many times, and each time it's covered alongside the larger reality that's not just the only example. And just, back to the point, or what I was just had up anyway, which is that this is exactly the kind of thing we're talking about, right? That this guy was shown to be a sexual manipulator, an Epstein network type of person. And instead of going, that's exactly what we're fighting in the world, Trump hid it. He stopped the visa of the newspaper that wanted to expose that, or did, and they just don't want them involved because it's not about truth. It's not about accountability. It's not about lower government, less spending, or anything else that was promised. It was about their agenda at the expense of everything else. But as long as they can get just enough people, just enough of the screaming idiots at the top of the partisan paradigm to just go, but you're wrong, trust the plan, it's all going to work out, just long enough, then they'll squeak by. But if you care about the reality, about what you were actually promised, and you start screaming about it right now, maybe we can actually get those things. Or you could just put your head down and then hope for the best. Well, but, historically, you can look into what that does in the past for people that do that with, I just hope the government does what I want. Let's see if that works out for you. Now, in regard to censorship and kind of just the similar, kind of on the point of corruption and just showing you so obviously what side of this is being the manipulator. Never does that mean good guy, bad guy, because I don't believe that when we're talking about governments fighting governments. I think we're just dealing with different levels of corruption. And in this case, what we can see from the U.S. government, or rather just their technocratic apparatus in this country doing through Twitter, is suppressing the flow of information coming from the spokesman for the Iranian government. As Jeremy Scahill says, stripping the Iranian officials of the verification is insane, particularly considering the way Twitter was used as part of the diplomatic process in the war. Like literally, that's such an excellent point. You guys are using this like an official platform for your own operations, and then for you to effectively not just remove their verification, which that suppresses their content. You're basically hiding that from the diplomatic process, at least as it pertains to Twitter. And look, we know how much Twitter is important to them right now. So this is important because of that. And it says this encourages fake news, of course, but also part of a broader censorship campaign waged by the self-proclaimed free speech warrior. Just insulting how obvious all this is. Now, again, the point is that they've removed the blue check, and the verification from the Iranian spokesperson's account. Now, that was just, there's a couple more points we'll get into and around that, but also larger Iran before we get to that, more still on the side of corruption and different failures of this current administration. Now, Rand Paul came out yesterday and said, next week, I'm holding a hearing with a whistleblower who will testify publicly about the COVID cover-up. Mark your calendars, Wednesday, May 13th. The truth is coming. Now, I'm on the fence when it comes to Rand Paul. I've seen a lot of things lately that, including voting against what he was saying, that makes me concerned. Now, my first thought was, well, Fauci's, I guess, the statute of limitations runs out on the 11th, right? Okay, it's the 6th right now. Why would this truth is coming bombshell wait until after Fauci was no longer being, able to be held accountable for what everyone says they want? And I shouldn't say that like that, in the sense of like this, you're the Republican side of this in Trump's administration and the people they claim they're fighting for. So I said, so after Fauci isn't held accountable, how does that work? Also, in my opinion, and I think you agree, the truth came out a long time ago. The idea that, look, I'm interested to hear what these people say, but what would in any real sense, what would it change in a real, material sense? In my opinion, every single part of this has been proven 100 times over. Now, maybe they'll add something that even makes it more clear. But I'm very skeptical about whatever this momentum is, because I mean, I get the sense this is going to be about the COVID cover-up, about the Wuhan market, or the origin of China, or or maybe just in many people's minds, the fact that you're talking about a virus at all. And I think at the end of the day, we're dealing with something that's much, much, much more nuanced than that, as people that have been really paying attention over the years have come to see about this, which is why it was so interesting. This story sort of arced back around. In the beginning, we were the ones, because it was the right thing to do in the beginning of the conversation, to go, well, we're talking about pathogens. Let's go back and look at the times they've faked these things. Let's go back and look at the times they've done these exercises. The same things that we and Derek and I and everyone else were covering right when that started, that then Alex Jones broke the story of like 2 years later. The point, though, is that this was stuff that we were going into because it was like, well, we don't know where this is going to go. So let's look at the biomanipulation, look at the background, look at the origin. And we questioned, and we went through it all. It fine-tooth comb. The military games, the origin, the research before, the gain of function, the idea of what happened afterward, all the different organizations, the Charles Lieber, all of it. And it was interesting to see that there was, something that was going on, but there was all sorts of anomalies. And the point was, when we talked about Fort Detrick and the vaping illness and the whole damn thing, we got shut down by these people. By the way, even the people on the side now screaming, this is the only thing that makes sense, largely the Trump-supporting Republicans who were saying fake news. Now, then we started to realize, okay, there's much more to this story. And it's not as simple as just saying they worked on this in Fort Detrick. There's more to this. So now this comes back around, and we all went through this, whatever it was, a year ago, where they're like, suddenly we can now talk about Wuhan and the dominant. Well, and we'd already moved way past that. It's just the same old cycle, guys. Now, again, Rand Paul, you can decide. Maybe he doesn't know that. Maybe I'm wrong. But May 13th, and just to be fair, Rand Paul has recently been saying, like today and yesterday, like, hey, Fauci needs to be held accountable. So he is saying that. But who knows if it's a time thing, but why wouldn't you have done this on May 10th? It just seems a strange thing to me. My gut, as I know you know, is the screaming that this is not going to happen. And on that note, Rand Paul says, this was actually, I forgot I included it. So he says the DOJ has 1 week left to charge Anthony Fauci for the worst cover-up in modern medical history. Yeah, but includes both sides of the government. That's the point, guys. Trump, Biden, the whole thing. He lied to Congress about funding gain of function. He did. And I think it was actually Rand Paul that was the one that did a good job on breaking that down. It was literally like the whole EPPP thing they did. It was really obvious. Millions died. Trillions were spent. Fauci walked away with the book deals and fawning media coverage instead of handcuffs. I said, watch as this administration and the rest of whatever this U.S. government is today fails to hold Fauci accountable despite all the promises. And he also points this out today, David Morenz. Now, we did a show on that when that first came out. That's the guy under Fauci who it seems there's no real provable connection on record, as opposed to the fact that we know that they were working together. My point is, I think that was constructed that way. And there's already been statements in Congress that Fauci says, well, we weren't really working alongside each other. So I feel like that's already been set up a very clear way. On top of that, I don't think Morenz will be held accountable either. And if he does, that feels like a scapegoat anyway. But it says Dr. Fauci's top advisor was indicted, but Fauci himself still walks free. The DOJ has 5 days left to indict him before the statute of limitations runs out. Come on, guys. Are we really going to pretend like they would wait until the last second when all this has been there the entire time? It just doesn't make any sense. It's wishful. It's hopium. And as Truth Shines Forever writes, Trump gave him a medal. Trump never fired him. And worse, in 2017, Trump's NIH lifted Obama's ban on Fauci's genocidal gain-of-function research. Fauci was pardoned, so it's Trump, the one to go after for the genocide. Impeach the pedophile rapist today, he writes at the end. You can decide if you agree with that. The point, though, guys, is there's so many examples that show you that these people aren't on your side. We just drifts in the background. It's like when Brian from High Impact Flicks points out the idea of Trump's bump stock or his red flag laws, and people just like lose their minds. It's like, well, those are very if you would ask them point blank, they'd say, no, that was Biden. No, it was Trump. It's narrative versus reality. And I simply said, anyone still pretending this administration was ever going after this man or the larger COVID fraud is dishonest or blind. Time to realize whose side you're actually on. And it's not left or right. Department of Justice does not plan to arrest Dr. Fauci and is expected to let the statute of limitations run out. Now, what were all the screaming Nick Sorter, Eric Howdery types yelling about? Well, Moran's got to drop the dime on Fauci. Well, guess what? That's not going to happen until after the limitations runs out. You think they didn't know? Well, I don't think they know anything. I think those guys are just basically repeaters. My point, though, is that even if they did, they would have shared it anyway because that's what they do. So effectively, they were lying, gaslighting to go, it's all going to get Fauci, knowing that it wasn't possible the way it was lined up. That's not by accident. Trump destroyed America to benefit Israel, Daniel McAdams writes. Kim.com, as somebody who was supporting Trump at one point, points out the reality of this. And as somebody pointed out to me, for example, the gas, way higher. Like, for example, in California, 6 something in California right now, last I checked. When Biden left office, gas was $3.13 a gallon. Now, there are going to be variances across the country, but these are accurate. Today, at least where he was pointing to, $4.59. Biden left office, electricity, 17.5 per kilowatt. Now it's 22.7. Oil, 70 per barrel. Now it's 124 up and down. Last I checked, one something. Biden left office, heating oil, $2.50. Now, $4.99. Coal, 116.35. Now it's 158.4. Biden left office for beef, $5.50. Now it's $8.49. And you can keep going down the list. Now, who knows? Maybe it'll all swing back around and be better than ever. Always possible, guys, but that's not what was promised. That's not what's happening. This is not some guided plan. And we'll get to that later in the show about the absurd claims they're making about, well, even if it goes to 200, it's worth it to stop them from doing something they weren't doing in the first place, guys. It's insane. Or Rubio telling you, if we let them control the strait, even though they've never done it before and they haven't stopped, that ultimately they could get your gas to $8. And so you have to do it instead? You're doing to us? I just don't understand how people can't see what's going on. And there are some of them. Oh, and just in case you missed it, $1 billion for this just total normal ballroom that apparently Graham let out was going to be military stuff underneath. But don't talk about that. And if you claim it's just not a ballroom, then you're a conspiracy theorist. Anyone saying it's not obliterated is fake news. But they've got it against every day. The point is about Trump claiming the Iran stuff. They lie. They lie every single day about everything they want you to think. And then the next day, we'll just tell you something new. So before we get into the larger point, guys, I just continue to point out the absurdity of what this people like Benny Johnson are doing. They're dancing clowns. They're clapping seals. Mike Davis warns the grand conspiracy probe has the potential to bring down big names. Sure. People point to the grand jury thing from last year that's supposed to be starting January 2026. Yeah, we're pretty sure it's May. Okay, well, hey, maybe it's all coming down behind the scenes. Look, I've never argued that these things aren't possible. In fact, I get the sense. I'm baffled why they haven't even give you something. Give us one. Go after Comey's second or something and pretend that means everything. I would argue that's a lie, but even that would at least be something to debate. They're just going Fauci, Obama, Clinton, it's all going down. And then nothing ever happens. One after another. Every single day. Literally, like the account, like the skiff. Every single day. Using old videos from 2025 and saying, I can't believe what I just saw. It's all coming down. Brand new clip. Just lying to you. Straight up lying. Or as we get to Iran, the same accounts going in and taking an old clip of Aragachi from, I think, last year or year before that. And saying, the deal's been made. He agrees to the strait. Nope, didn't happen. And we'll get to why that's happening because there's an effort to keep people thinking it's going on. Iran's been very clear about it. They have been every time, and they keep showing you Trump's lying. Maybe tomorrow we'll find out they weren't this time. But I think the obvious point is to consider that, as we talked about at the beginning, check yourself, consider Trump is telling the truth, but realize the consistency is pretty clear. So back to the point, he's saying, guess who, guys? Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, James Comey, James Clapper, John Brennan, they're all going down. I think every one of them should be in prison. And guess what this reminds me of? This is the exact, where was it? Oh, there you go. This is the exact list of names that Alex Jones was pointing to, right? And of course, this is down here in 2024 where he said, if we can just keep Trump out of jail, the guy who now tells you is, well, we'll get to that, was telling you he's the bad guy, now suddenly going, but no, I'm just fighting for him. He's occupied by a foreign power and he hates me, but I'm fighting for him to do the right thing and support his choices in the midterms. I'm not making it up. I told you guys. I couldn't have been sure, but I knew it. Every single time he will come back around. So we'll come back to that. The point, though, is that if you just keep Trump alive, Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, Fauci, Hillary, they're all going to jail. I hope so. I still hope so. And this was in August 2025, where he says he's got some big, big, big things coming. And they came, and then it fell. Comey's going to jail. Nope, didn't happen because they lied over and over and over. Hear me again. They should be in prison. I hope they go to jail. My point is these people don't want that or don't care or are just willing to lie. Like at the end of the day, what I think Benny Johnson and the rest do is demonstrate that they don't actually care if Fauci or Obama goes to jail, because if they did, they would stand up and go, hey, man, you've been saying this for a year, for 2 years, for 8 years. Do something about it. And if you're not, since you haven't, it's obvious you're a dishonest person and you don't care. But they don't do that, which shows you that they don't care. They care about siding with Trump. But so I simply said, as always, let me know when they actually arrest somebody, Benny. I'm sure you will carry on hyping regardless. Some of us actually want these criminals in prison. Let's see what happens, right? There's new things every day, but the things they pointed to last year fizzled out. So the new things you should consider might go the same direction. In this case, we have Laura Logan. So where are the indictments for treason and sedition? She says, asking on behalf of millions. It's a good question. It is. Because what she's pointing to is this same ridiculous account. What she's promoting is the skiff, saying Brennan and Comey handwritten notes of, and he's posted this same thing 15 times. I've seen this exact post. They do, and they share and they circle. The point that you should take from this is, okay, they're charging them for things that are not that, right? That's what's happening. Just like last time, Comey, and this time, the seashells, up Instagram post. So her valid question is, why aren't you going after them for what you promised you would go after them for, Mr. Trump? Right? So the right response to her would be, that was the question a year ago. Now take the next logical step and call out and criticize the administration who's choosing not to hold these men accountable. I find it very telling for any of them doing this when the most obvious next step continually fails to happen. Asking why you're not doing that should have been obvious the last time. Now that it's happened twice in a row, the question should be, okay, it seems to me that you're not actually doing this, or rather the statement. I just find this very obvious. This keeps happening. These people are out there who want to make it seem like they are calling them out, but all they're really doing is continue to support that they pretend something's going to happen. This account does the same thing every day. So does this Julie Donuts one. She posts Obama shit, and this is Donald Trump on the 5th saying the same thing he said 100 times. And he's also lying about it, which he always has. Obama shipped $1.7 billion in cash to Iran. No, they returned the money that they stole, just like Iran is right now trying to get Trump to do, is return the money that they have from theirs, as well as pay reparations for what they made them do in this illegal war. I doubt that happens, but if it does, how humorous would that be for Trump to try to frame that as a deal when he keeps making the lie about Obama doing the same thing? Now, that's not defending Obama. They're all criminals. But the reality of the point was they simply had money that was Iran's that they gave back to them. And they've lied about it ever since because they want to make it sound like the Democrats support Iran, even though they're just as involved with Israel about going after him. But he goes, you mean Obama funded them and helped them obtain nuclear weapons? Sure did. That's true. Yeah, she adds that, right? So Trump just goes, Obama, money in Iran. He's done that 100 times. But she turns that into, it's all coming down, because they have literally like a shtick where they do this. And then he goes off and goes, why does he keep doing this? Let me tell you what Q has to say. And that's when you should laugh, which is that it's all a big plan of Clinton and uranium one. Good. Arrest them. The fact that you can pretend that's still somehow drifting forward is pretty damn sad. Hey, but if I'm wrong, I will happily tell you that person was right. Doesn't seem like that's what's happening. Now, in regard to another example, I think is very telling. FBI raids Senator Louise Lucas's Portsmouth office and her neighboring cannabis business. This is very interesting. Now, I want to see where this goes. Even just on its own, like just the story itself, I find interesting because of the two overlaps here, and you'll see what I mean. Now, it says, adjacent to her office, Lucas, it's called the Cannabis Outlet, a hemp and cannabis-related retail business that's actually linked to her. Fox News report, which then now it starts to make sense why they went into both. And they went into both her office and this simultaneously. Now, Fox News, who just weirdly happened to be right there on the scene waiting for them to do it. I'm pretty sure we can all piece together why that happened. which shows you this was a planned propaganda plot. Even if there was a crime being done, which again, I think they're all criminals. Wouldn't surprise me if she was manipulating that business to do whatever. You know, they're all like that. They're all committing fraud, in my opinion. And I'm not saying let me put it this way to be objective and accurate. They're all capable of committing fraud. And I think all of them are very dishonest and criminal in a lot of ways. But whether each one of them are conducting fraud is, you know, who's to say? But I think you can look into their business and find out that most of these politicians are very, very fast and loose with the very things they claim they care about, the law, Constitution. So my point, though, is that Fox News being present before they go shows you that they had planned this to be a propaganda tool. And it says they SWAT teams, because that makes sense, right? Why would you need heavily armed SWAT teams? Because that's what they use for everything today. Welcome to militarized America, because you jaywalk these days and might as well be a SWAT team to arrest you. And it says there with weapons drawn and ordering everyone inside. Why weapons drawn exactly? Because that's what they do anyway now. To exit the building with their hands up, at least 3 people were reportedly placed in handcuffs and taken into custody. Lucas arrived at the scene shortly after the raid began. When asked by a reporter what the federal action was about, she said she had no idea. Excuse me. Now, U.S. Representative Bobby Scott said whose district includes this location was among the first elected officials to publicly respond to the raid, arguing the federal action comes amid what he described as Donald Trump's attacks on political opponents. Now, we know that. I mean, look, if you're, again, I hate when I do that. I think it's objectively clear that this person is using his political power to go after people he doesn't like. And I'm saying it like that to be objective because, let's be honest, it's literally provable that he is objectively, that's my opinion. But my point in saying it is that I think everybody can see that there's both sides of this use their power to go after the people that are adversarial to them. So I want to make sure I was clear so it's not just, we all see the thing Trump bad, because people tend to take it that way. And that's not the way that's meant. It's always it's always about the government and both sides of it applying this thing. And so in this case, are we really going to debate that Donald Trump is not using his position, even if you feel he's justified, even if you think it's about giving it back to them, to do the same thing, to weaponize the government against, look at what happened with Comey and all the rest. Again, even as they should have gone to prison for things, they just tried to weaponize the institution to go after them for things. I mean, that's even a bad way to frame that, because I think there are people within that did definitely see it that way. But again, my real opinion, or rather the overarching larger opinion, is that it was done to fail. So sorry, that was kind of confusing to get into, but it's just, there's multifaceted, like you have Kash Patel and his agenda. And I don't think he's even in the know when it comes to, let's just say, what Trump is doing. And so he has things that he's doing for petty reasons that might not align with the larger agenda. I just think it's important to see that there's different layers to it, but I digress. Continuing, the point was saying he's doing this for political purposes. Now, he noted the raid came roughly 2 weeks after Lucas had helped lead Virginia's redistricting referendum effort, which Democrats hailed as a rejection of Trump-backed attempts to influence GOP states to redraw their congressional maps. So is he doing this just to go after her for doing something which she did say directly to him? I'm doing this in your face. Are we even going to quibble about the fact that's exactly what Trump would and has done? That's not to say that's what's happening, but it's obvious this is right in his wheelhouse for getting angry about something like this and responding in exactly this way. Senator Louise Lucas has not been even charged with a crime. So I find that interesting when you've got all of these people all over the internet right now screaming about how this is everything. It's all starting. That's what they're doing. It's all starting to come down. They're going after all the Democrats. That's what this is literally being framed as, except she wasn't even charged with a crime. Now, maybe tomorrow that'll be the case, but usually when this is something that's aimed, they would be, let's put it this way. If you think they're going after the Democrats for all their provable crimes, she would have walked away in handcuffs. Now, Scott also questioned how Fox News appeared to be positioned at the scene early, of course, and we should ask that question. At this point, we simply do not know what this ultimately means. He says right now there's far more theatrics and speculation than actual information available to the public. I mean, look at what happened with Renee Good, right? I mean, and was it Reddy? Alex Preddy. It was instantaneous. Or the shootings, Butler, or anything else. You get this wildly over-the-top effort, just like the Democrats do when they're in power, to control the narrative and just yell, Democrat, we know it's a Democrat, even to this very day, you can't verify that about, Tyler Robbins or any of them. And they still to this day say the left maniacs, Charlie Kirk, and the whole, it's wild. Lucas currently serves as the chamber's president pro tempore. Is that what? Wait, is it pro tempore? Is it tempore? I forget the pronunciation. Making her one of the highest-ranking members of the General Assembly. So influential. So this might be seen as at least want to be seen by people they want to manipulate into thinking they're fighting for you as the attack you've been waiting for on the evil Democrats. She also chairs the powerful Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee, placing her at the center of this year's contentious intra-party budget negotiations, which seems relevant as well. In recent months, Lucas has pushed aggressively to end or scale back Virginia's lucrative sales and use tax exemptions for data centers, arguing the incentives have become too costly for the state and place growing strain on Virginia's electric grid. Man, this seems more relevant than anything. So this seems like, I would argue if I had to pick, this is probably the driving force behind this. The idea that she is trying to push back on them giving what appears to be a lucrative sales and use tax exemption for data centers who are destroying cities all over this country. And on top of that, House Democrats and the governor resisted her effort to stop them from getting tax-free, and so just to show you a left-right coordination on the thing that this Democrat, for whatever reason, maybe dishonestly, is trying to stop, creating a major impasse that's delayed completion of the state budget. And so suddenly she gets investigated for crimes. That could just be coincidence, but look at what we're seeing everywhere else. And so I find that very interesting. That connects right back to the central agenda, and maybe somebody, even again, for their own personal interests, challenging what is, I think, the larger government technocratic agenda that's taking place. Now, beyond her legislative work, Lucas has also faced scrutiny tied to Virginia's evolving cannabis laws. Virginia legalized simple possession of marijuana in 2021 through legislation she co-sponsored. Now, even right there, even though I agree with the fact that technically I want decriminalization, legalization allows this exact kind of thing to happen, which I disagree with, but at least it's going in a direction where it's less criminalized, less people go to jail for a plant. But this, even though I agree with where it kind of is going, could be seen as corruption, conflicts of interest. You're literally you're co-sponsoring bills that allow this to be legal, and then how much you want to bet if you dig in, she probably had this lined up before she went to that bill. Just the way I see government, but I could be wrong. That was just a random thought. There's nothing to base that on. But a 2022 Virginia Mercury investigation found that cannabis-related products sold at specifically the cannabis outlet contained levels of THC inconsistent with labeling. Come on, really? That's what you're going to do? I swear, if this comes down to some cannabis thing, it's that, first of all, that was not what this is about. I will bet my life it's not about the cannabis thing, but it's being used because there is, if you haven't been paying attention, a major Republican push, again, to go after cannabis now in 2026. It's insane. I shouldn't say major, but more than I'm used to seeing. It died off pretty strongly for a while. The last push I saw was, weirdly enough, Donald Trump and Sessions doing the same thing. So funny, isn't it? So obvious. But so the point was, they're claiming her cannabis at the location, or at least the business that she supports, had inconsistent levels. Now, look, today more so than ever, there's lab testing that can be done. But I've heard, I remember reporting, that my platform was started really around cannabis law reform. So it goes back with me a long way. And in California, where I grew up, that was the first state in the whole country to do that. And so early on, I was talking to people in this experience. And, back when they were still, in some places still are, dealing with banking issues and having to work with cash in hand and getting robbed because of it. And you could ask whether that was some kind of push. But overall, the point is that the lab testing shouldn't even be necessary, especially since what we're talking about is a naturally grown plant. But overall, they argue all sorts of things today. And so they require the testing and everything else, even though weird how we don't get testing for things like GMOs or, glyphosate or, funny how that doesn't matter, right? And I want to know the level of glyphosate and dioxins in my food. No, you don't get that. My point is that this is about trying to create a situation where it's unregulated retail environment, like she's somehow some massive, whether it's drug violations or just fraud because you're claiming it's inconsistent. My point on top of that is that it's not always exact. for many reasons, especially if you're not doing like high level lab testing, but just doing something much more, I don't know, you could buy things you can do it with at home, right? And it says, sold in a largely unregulated retail environment that existed before. Oh, hold on. It says, so basically inconsistent with the labeling that were being used before the transition of the market. And it says, at the time, laboratory testing commissioned by the Mercury found some products sold at the store exceeded the levels of concentration, which, by the way, I find funny because that's like, what's an example of that? Like buying something that you want and getting more than you asked for, and like, yeah, that's not allowed. It's like that's a positive thing for anybody, especially since, as I'll quote Willie Nelson, the only way you can be killed by cannabis if a pound falls on the top of your head. Swear, I can't believe people still don't understand the reality of this. Now it says the story put a spotlight on concerns about Virginia's loosely regulated hemp and cannabis market. Hemp? How in the world are we even including hemp in this conversation? The ignorance in people. Now, yes, cannabis. Hemp and marijuana are cannabis in the genus, but it is not the same. It's to argue that you could regulate hemp is to pretend that there's some kind of a psychoactive point. They don't want hemp because it threatens 100 different markets in this country. But it says, following legalization of marijuana possession, but before creation of a fully regulated retail sales system, which is now before the location. Now, we're going to follow on this, or at least I'll try to. This is a smaller part of this, so I'll probably lose sight of it if you guys don't keep it in front of me, but I'll try. My point is there's so much going on today that this might drift away, but I'm interested to see where this goes. Because first of all, the data center point, I think, is probably the focal point, but the cannabis side of this, like if she's fraudulent, right? If she's committing a crime by whatever, fraudulently conducting business, then that's a crime. But if this ends up being about some kind of cannabis loophole, or somehow, going after her for cannabis in any way, it just kills me. It'll be abuse of power, and it won't be about cannabis. We'll have to wait and see. Now, Rand Paul, just to make the point quickly about this continuing, says a federal hemp ban would devastate American farmers and small businesses while pushing products into unregulated markets. The point is, he's pushing out his Hemp Safety Enforcement Act because there's a push to stop this. That's why hemp is being weirdly included in that conversation, because there's an agenda here. Why would you ban hemp? Because there's business interests that see it as a threat. I mean, you go back to the Hearst family and their timber industry, and that's one of the reasons this even started in the first place. It's no different now, almost different, but core point seems to be the same. But good for him. I support this act, at least as far as it states now. I'm going to read through it when I can actually go deeper. But overall, it is pushed. Now, one last point on this before we move on to a couple partisan points and larger discussions about Israeli influence. Kash Patel came out on the 5th and says the FBI and the Justice Department identified and located 200 plus innocent kids and arrested more than 350 child predators in a month-long op called Operation Iron Pursuit. 350 plus is the most takedowns we've ever had the last year in any violent crimes against children op under President Trump's administration, more than restored justice, enduring justice, relentless justice last year, all big successes as well as protecting children. Okay, now this is, if actually happened, great thing. Now the reason I say that is because if you care to look into this, and I've been questioning this for quite a while for a lot of reasons. There's a thing that they do where they come out and make a statement like this. We just saved 1,000 children from something. And more than once, I've looked into it for, following up and go like, it's weird to me that I've never been able to find any real, I guess let's put it simply. I question whether these are just being made up. Now, that's not to say that I do believe that there's operations that go on, the FBI and others, regardless of my opinions about the institutions. But I find it I think it's worth questioning with all the lies that we're seeing, with all that's going on, whether these kind of things are being constructed. Now, when you look into this, what you'll find is, first of all, the allegation of 350 is a kind of a scattered point about people that they have identified, and many of them end up in homes, like the trafficking pipeline, CPS kind of a thing. Now, that, to be very clear, getting them away from this, if that's what they save them from, is an absolutely positive step. But I just hate the idea that we basically cycle these children right back through a system that abuses them, that allows them to be abused. But I really want to ask that question. And as Tracy Gallagher writes, and this is the real point, is, almost every single comment, she says, you can't arrest one from the Epstein client list. Why did the FBI not seek a search warrant for the Zorro Ranch? We covered that very extensively. By the way, yeah, it never happened. Even though you had people in Congress or in the U.S. government basically saying from a state level, I was screaming about this in 2019. No one's ever investigated. Not that it's been investigated and put down. Nobody's investigated it. So that means this is one very clear example where they have failed in their job to actually follow up there. And there's women claiming there's dead bodies buried, like people that were there with knowledge that gave information to the politician. As she writes, the AG in New Mexico was investigating it, and Trump's FBI said they were taking over. Zip happened. That place was never searched. Not one damn arrest, and you had the nerve to say there was no evidence Epstein was trafficking girls? What happened to the former Prince Andrew? Do your job. Now remember, guys, this is, let me grab this real quick. That's just her statement on Twitter. But that's a factual statement that you should look into for yourself that we've already covered. Here's Kash Patel. Again, I mean, the fact that he can still be on the record with making a statement like this that we can all prove, and I mean prove, which I don't use lightly, is a lie. I really don't know what else you need to see at this point, at least when it comes to this specific conversation.
No credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals. And the information we have, again, is limited.
So the answer is no one
For the information that we have
in the files.
in the case file.
Okay.
There's no credible.
Interesting. It's an interesting way to say that, isn't it? For the files that we have. Sorry, this platform is, I was just talking with Steve about this. I'm not joking. It probably takes about 10 seconds after I press a button for it to actually happen. I've literally had to plan around it, not to take time on this, because like seriously, I'll click something, I have to wait. So I have to basically press it before I start talking about it. How insane that is. This platform, I don't know, it doesn't matter. Who knows if it's by design or whatever else, but it's just crazy, the stuff we have to deal with on this. But overall, guys, it is insulting to me that this would be something you talk about as if you're doing your job when you've literally lied to the world about the one thing you said was most important. And that's why I come back to this point. I think it's important. Now, this is a different, it's like talking about any one of these contentious conversations that we find that I'd like to follow up with this, like any of the ones in the past. What children were rescued? Who goes to jail? I'd like some evidence that shows that this actually happened. Not because I'm necessarily doubting that they would even do this. I've seen them, whether, like every administration, take action like this. You could argue it's because there's honest people within the administration or because they just did it, whatever you want to say. I know these things have happened. Trump has done plenty of action in this very way. But nonetheless, with what we've dealt with, we should be asking whether things like this are just being screamed about. That's important. Now, in a partisan sense, what we're getting, people like Alex Jones, we'll get to later about the siding with Trump yet again, talking about the alien disclosure. And as he writes, FBI director, so Kash Patel, tells us that alien disclosure is imminent, and major religious leaders tell public to prepare faith to be shaken. Major victory for America. Like really hyping the thing, like the idea of leaning into that story with all that's going on, I find insulting. Now, of course, you got Alex Jones here doing this weird thing he does, like what he tried to do with David Icke or anybody else, where he tries to like kind of glom onto them, because at this point, Tucker Carlson has a much, much better reputation than Alex Jones, even amongst their own people, because Tucker Carlson, whether opportunism or not, struck out in that conversation when it was hard he came out and said Israel's committing genocide. Whether I question, like we all should, whether that was honest or not. I'm still glad he did it regardless. And at that time, Alex was still calling you fake news, whatever, well, not fake news, but downplaying these points, calling Palantir a small Democrat thing, acting like we were blackpilled for telling you exactly where this was going. And so now that Tucker's been doing it a long time and Alex Jones barely stumbled over there for 30 seconds and has now walked back over to telling you Trump's the best guy, he tries to couple these together and says, just in, with 4 red lights. That's how you know it's important. Tucker Carlson says U.S. President Trump is being held hostage by Netanyahu. Oh, now it's hostage. Not occupied, not controlled, but it's not Trump's fault, guys. He's being held. We've arced back around to where Trump's being tricked and manipulated, or, guys, this is painfully stupid. It's always possible that he's being manipulated, but you can prove 1,000 ways over, well before we got here, that Trump is working with these groups. Now, I'm of the mind that there's more to it, where now he may well be upset while he's working with them that he realizes they're playing him too. Like, you can see both those things happening, where he is aligned with their agenda, but also recognizes Netanyahu tricked him while they were doing it together. But he says Tucker's statement's 100% true. So be clear. Alex is telling you, Benjamin Netanyahu is controlling Donald Trump. The same thing he called us blackpilled and all the things about for making sure we were stressing before he was elected or put in place. And he goes, in the report below, I lay out how not only Trump, but America is being held hostage and must break free. And how do you do that? Well, obviously, you support Trump's picks in the midterms, guys, because that's just what an honest, I don't even know what I would say to make fun of that even more. Alex Jones wants the GOP to win the midterms. Literal quote, my criticisms of Trump have been picked up by neocons and rhinos. Really? And that, he says that I'm attacking Trump. It's the opposite. That's what he says. So he's saying very clearly, people who, rhinos and neocons, you mean like literally everybody you're working with right now, picked up his criticism and basically misrepresented it. Somehow misrepresented when he literally quoted saying he's changed. He's not the same. He is all the things he just showed his true colors, all that. Apparently that's not what it sounds like, even though it's literally what those words mean. And now I'm not attacking Trump. I'm fighting for it. It's the opposite. I'm trying to get Trump to do the right thing. So again, guys, have fun making sense of that to understand how you can say that they're controlled by a foreign power, but I want to help him and support his choices. Or at the very least, understand that whether he's controlled by a foreign power or not, that does not influence, or at the very least, wouldn't seem to affect his stating that you're a ridiculous person or that you're not important or all the things he said about you guys. So you still want you support his choice. I mean, I just can't make fun of this enough. This is pathetic. You are just falling back, by the way, exactly like we all knew this was going to go. Now, on the point of that Israel conversation, because it is important, not just to briefly point at and then pretend you're on Trump's side, but to actually break down the reality of well beyond Trump or Biden, that the Israeli Zionist government is influencing this country. Prominent Christian Zionist group in lobbying U.S. lawmakers on Israel without revealing it's funded by Israel. Now, where are they talking about this? Where's Trump's administration standing up and going, oh my God, great breaking story. We have to stop Israel from controlling our country. Well, Alex Jones, you're telling us he's held hostage. Wouldn't this be what you stand on and go, look at this, or any number of the stories? No, it all comes down to supporting the political status quo. But that's how you fight the deep state, guys. You support the midterms. Now it says this evening in Manhattan, the Greater Israel Real Estate Event will be advertising land available for sale in the West Bank. This has been happening incessantly. Now realize I can't speak to this exact event because I haven't seen the actual printout. I couldn't find it. But in many examples I've shown before, these are Jewish people only. That's a bad way to frame that, or say it's only Jewish people allowed. That's not a secret. It's literally posted on the information. Somebody showed up as a Palestinian and showed up and said, because this is supposed to be framed as a land auction, even though it's illegal, even though you're talking about land that's stolen, that from an international perspective is considered illegal, that even Trump pretended he was against, but also allowed Miriam Allison to do it because she paid him. And allowed Netanyahu to do it because they made the agreement all that back time when Trump came into power. Remember that? And he made an agreement with Netanyahu to let him do that. We talked about it all the way back then. The point, though, is that these events, which are supposed to be like open land auctions in the country where there shouldn't be discrimination, we're told, or where you're not allowed to say only white people, only black people, only Christians, only Jews, not allowed. And yet, weirdly enough, you have a Zionist organization directly from Israel that comes and goes, hey, only Jewish people allowed in this room. My point is a Palestinian showed up and said, I'm just here to buy some land. They wouldn't let him in. And more than Palestine, any number of people have tried to do the same thing. I've been covering this myself. So think about how one, racist, bigoted, insulting that is, to argue that you're selling land from Palestinians that you've illegally stolen in a foreign country to only Jewish people from that country. Now realize, when you understand what Zionism is, that's why that's going that direction, to make you think it's about Judaism. But realize this is not just about this one topic. You're watching this happen here for a reason. Now, this is bigger than just property sales. What this story is about is the fact that a lobbying group directly tied to the Israeli government, not some group that's talking about Israel interests, but the government that's funding them, who is now lobbying U.S. politicians and for this purpose. And yet we act like we can't see this. They're being paid to ignore it. It says, just to restart over, called the Great Israeli Real Estate Event, will be advertising land available in the West Bank, which in and of itself should be enough to shut this down. It's a crime, while also making legal, tax, and banking services available for those who want to become settlers, according to the event's public listed information. Despite the commercial and internationally illegal nature of the event, it is being hosted at a religious institution, the Park East Synagogue on Upper East Side. Now, aside from that, it's not being framed as a religious event. But at the same time, that's how they're using this. And now, to be clear, I actually will argue that's being used and done that way to make that seem like it makes more sense. There were examples I showed in the past that weren't in a synagogue. They were simply just in a certain location, and they were discriminating against anybody that they didn't want to be there. Previous events have drawn protesters and counter-protesters, of course, leading to the charges of anti-Semitism, even though you're literally discriminating against anybody but Jewish people. And it says the protesters have countered that it is inappropriate to use a religious institution to shield such a contentious practice. A spokesperson for New York City, Mayor Zohran Mamdani, declined to comment on the Israeli Real Estate Expo. Now, that's an important thing to remember, because even though Trump was like, oh, he's basically the MAG on the left, shook his hand, he's with us, he's going to be good for New York, despite all of the idiots that we always laugh about screaming he was going to end the world because he's a communist. Turns out he's just like all the rest of the politicians. Oh my God, what a surprise. Very much like we were telling you that I was skeptical, because and at the end of the day, what'd he do? He ended up basically, long story short, leaned into the same conversation. In this case, allowed these kind of things to happen, turned a blind eye, allowed them to protest out. I mean, all the things that we're talking about. Now, the protest was a different point. Overall, Zohran Mamdani appears to be the same thing as all the rest with a different slant. I always hope I'm wrong about that. My point is, he has the opportunity to call this out as somebody who pretended to be against the Israeli Zionist agenda and did not. In the wake of previous protests, New York City Council, with a veto-proof majority in March, passed legislation restricting such demonstrations. Right, you're not allowed to protest either. This week in Washington, meanwhile, saw the launch of Israeli Advocacy Day, a high-profile lobbying campaign led by Eagle's Wings, a New York-based Christian Zionist organization. What we can reveal today is that the campaign is secretly financed by the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, implicating foreign agent registration laws in a serious way, the FARA Act. That story by journalist Nick Cleveland Stout. Now, you can read below, but just understand, guys, this is the Israeli government, a foreign power, knowing what they're doing on the ground in this country, funding propaganda groups and land exchange. You just can't. I mean, that's just a small example of the 1,000 things. Like, for example, the reality that here, I'll just play it right now since I've got it right here. If I get this to work. That Israel controls the Pentagon, says Wilkerson.
It's unquestionable that the Epstein business was heavily influenced, let me put it that way, by Mossad.
And so that's somehow emblematic on these huge geopolitical issues.
Yes, I watched Mossad take over the Pentagon. In 2002, the Pentagon was infiltrated by Mossad. They did not need any identification to get through the river entrance of the building. They went upstairs to Douglas Feith, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, the third most powerful man in the Defense Department. Occasionally, they went to the second most powerful man, Paul Wolfowitz, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and they had run of the Pentagon. Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, said to my boss one time, hell, I don't run my building. Mossad does.
It's just always that obvious. It's just a choice. So, getting into the reality on the ground. Now, this is a new report we mentioned earlier, and this is clear. Realistically, to a certain degree, it was clear right when this started, because the 12-day war before it already made it clear that Iran was not in the position that they were claiming they were. So that right there needs to make you ask, even with this reporting, because of this reporting, why would they have done it anyway? The point being is that if they recognized in that 12-day war that Iran was not as weak as they thought, was not as, any number of the things they claim, as radical and was going to fall apart, or that they weren't supporting them, that if they engaged in the 12-day war, which is what we know happened, and Iran effectively bombed through their defenses and effectively, what's the word? It's not sheltered, but weathered their responses pretty damn well, and showed that they were not just going to be taken. The point is now, when this one started, because the whole thing comes down to the fact that it seems they weren't prepared, and it seems they underestimated Iran. Did they? I mean, because the point was that last one showed that. So why did they do it anyway? Well, this is where you need to ask the question. Was this because they wanted it to go this way? And if you ask that, how does that make sense for U.S. interests? This is where I come to the point of where I think Trump was manipulated by Netanyahu. That's not the same as saying he's not involved, though. That's my point earlier. Trump is in line with his agenda, but I think he fancies himself as the one in control. And even if he gets the sense half the time that they're all trying to vie for their own control, I think they like to stoke that idea that because Trump, that's how you play a narcissist. You allow him to think he's the one in charge, even the people around him. Like I've always said, they come in and go, Trump, here's the only two options we have, and you're the smartest and you have to choose. And there's probably 75 options, and either one he chooses gives them what they want. It allows Trump to think he's the one making choices, and it allows them to control what he gets to choose from. It's how this works in the thing for a long time now. So, point is, it appears they got a lot more destruction than was originally admitted to. And why would they have gone into this knowing that this is the position they were in? I just don't see how Trump, even with what we know, would have allowed this if he was in any way in charge of his choices. So it comes down to, in my mind, either he's completely not in charge, or he wasn't aware this was going on in the first place, at least not regarding what was the reality of the situation. Now, Iran has hit far more U.S. military assets than reported, according to satellite imagery. Iranian airstrikes have damaged or destroyed at least 228 structures or pieces of equipment at U.S. military sites across the Middle East since the war began, hitting hangars, barracks, fuel depots, aircraft, key radar, communications, air defense equipment, according to a Washington Post analysis of satellite imagery. Now, as I've said from the beginning, they claim Iran is this evil terrorist group that just wants to kill everybody and hates America for their freedom, and you illegally bomb them. For the first time in my experience, the U.S. government directly bombs Iran. You give Iran, in fact, the legal opportunity to respond and do what you've always said they wanted to do. You've given them the legal allowance to do that, and they still didn't do it. Iran is still yet to bomb anything within the United States, thank God, and realize that they could have. And they chose not to because of the obvious reason. One, I think that would have been used to claim they were it would have turned the U.S. Machine against them. When right now it seems most of the people in this country are somewhat aware that Trump's lying about this stuff, even if they don't like Iran. That would have been a very different situation. But I just want you to think about that, is that ultimately they did bomb hospitals and schools, the very first bombing. We know this, it's a fact, and are continuing to bomb civilian locations. And what did Iran do? Targeted their military locations. And even if you want to argue the claims that were made, many of which I've proven were false, but just it's not outside the realm of possibility. In fact, let's just go ahead and say, because I believe this, that Iran is just as capable of doing that like any other government. But that's not what the evidence shows now. And they chose to bomb these locations while they just simply bombarded their civilian locations. Now, yes, they also did bomb their military stuff, but it was clear to the downtown center of Tehran, the downtown center of Beirut, that they were choosing to bomb the most publicly located. It's obvious what that was. So I just want you to think about what that shows you. You could argue just from a strategic perspective that Iran recognized that doing that would be used against them, and still argue that they're monsters willing to do it. Certainly possible. But realize that after all this time, you only have a one-sided view. It's pretty obvious what side is the one conducting the crimes. And that's, I've always made that point about Russia, for example, where over the years, you could argue Russia has always been what they claimed, but just was smart enough politically to recognize why it was always in their interest to play the good guy counterbalance to what the US government was doing in the world. And in fact, I really do think that's part of what he presented, because I don't think they're good guy, bad guy in this situation. I think all these governments represent the same problem to me, but it was clearly played well by Putin. Clearly a very solid politician. It's not a compliment. And I just think that's important to think about. So back to the point. All this stuff that they were actually taking out, and they responded with nothing but belligerent, responded with attacks accompanied by belligerent civilian, just destabilizing attacks. And that's what they've always done my entire career following this. Then Iran hit hangars, fuel depots, barracks, aircraft, key radar, communications, air defense equipment, according to the analysis. Now, the amount of destruction is far larger than what has been publicly acknowledged. The threat of air attacks rendered some of the U.S. bases in the region too dangerous for staff at normal levels, which one of the earliest reports was that they had to leave and go to hotels. They all denied it. We now know it's a fact. Like everything else they deny. That was the old statement that nothing is ever really true until it's been officially denied or something like that. The commanders moved out of most personnel from the sites, out of range of the fire. Now it says since the start of the war on the 28th, which really this has been ongoing for a while in regard to what they've been doing. And I'm not talking about some 47-year and eminent. The reality is, I mean, if you want to talk about the 47 years, ever since the Iranian Revolution, to take back their country from the illegally taken regime change called Operation Ajax, which is all public on the record, they've been trying to destabilize them ever since. Now, you can argue they're all terrorists. You could make both those arguments, but you have to admit what the U.S. did to them was a crime. You have to admit that ever since then, they've been manipulating, collapsing their economy like Bessent is publicly admitting to, and then acting like it's their fault. They've just come in. This government has just imploded. They're just now publicly stating the things that they've always tried to gaslight you into ignoring. Who knows if that's by design or not? They are pretty incompetent. Now, continues, since the start of the war, they claim 7 service members have died. Just like the last conversation with Iran and bombing and all the brain injuries, I just don't believe that. And remember, after that, we saw all these continual weird helicopter crashes and training exercises, like all one after another. That's what they do. That's my opinion. So in this case, 7 people have died. And all the things we've talked about, well, just come back to that. The point is that 7 people have died, 6 in Kuwait and 1 in Saudi Arabia is all they're claiming, but 400 with suffering injuries. 12 suffered injuries that, God, what was I? There's a point I'm just getting stuck on it because there was something I wanted to say right there I was going to come back to. I can't remember now. Anyway, so the point being is that I don't believe the numbers in comparison to the injuries. Like we had the traumatic brain injuries and no deaths. It just feels like they're hiding something. And I think that speaks to the lack of care for these people in general, using them like pieces on a board. 400 have suffered injuries as of April, U.S. military said. While most of the wounded returned to duty within days, at least 12 suffered injuries that military officials classified as serious, according to U.S. officials who, among others, spoke on the condition of anonymity. Also, let's not forget that they knew this response was coming. Iran went to the United Nations and said they would do their legal response to the co-belligerents of the war, like the UAE, like Qatar, like all the rest, because they were assisting them. And they left them there anyway. They left the people there, left the people on the ships, knowing that that was a potential attack. They left them there to be attacked. Satellite imagery of the Middle East is unusually difficult to acquire at present. Why is that? Because the 2 largest commercial providers, Vantor and Planet, have complied with requests from the U.S. government, their biggest customer, to limit, delay, or indefinitely withhold the publication of imagery of the region while the war is ongoing, making it difficult or impossible to access these counterstrikes. Why? Because they're lying to you. They're hiding information from you for an obvious reason, just like Israel's doing. Just like they're allowing that area to be all fuzzed out because they're hiding information from you. And those restrictions began less than 2 weeks into the war. Almost like they were like, we're going to win. Oh, wait, no, we're not. Hide everything. The Post reviewed more than 100 high-resolution Iranian-released satellite imagery. Yes, it came from Iran. You should question it. The Post verified the authenticity of 109 of these images by comparing them to lower resolution imagery from the European Union satellite. So if you're going to claim they're lying, then so you have to claim the EU's part of it. Maybe that's the case. It's called Copernicus, as well as high-resolution images from Planet where available. So 3 different cross-referencing. The Post excluded 19 Iranian images from the damage analysis because they couldn't find the comparison. It's inconclusive. No Iranian imagery was found to have been manipulated. Well, maybe there is. We didn't find it. The point is they didn't find it. We shouldn't trust the Washington Post anyway. Check for yourself. And a separate search of Planet imagery, Post reporters found 10 damaged or destroyed structures that were not even documented in their report. Now, I found that interesting. It could just be that one, like I take that back. I was going to say maybe they didn't know, or I wonder if there's more to that point, and I'm not even sure why. It just kind of stood out to me like, okay, this might actually lead to the, whether there's like, okay, here's one. The idea from the 12-day war where they argue that there was maybe some coordination about the locations that were bombed for like a great reset mindset of like destroying locations that were already ready to be redezoned or whatever. And there's a valid case we made about that. So in this, when you talk about locations that they didn't reveal with the information, you wonder why that happened. If you get what I'm saying, like maybe there's certain locations that do lead to some kind of a larger thing that nobody wants you to pay attention to. Just a thought, I question everything and these things, whether anybody else you think, the point is, even within these kind of things, you find deeper agendas that nobody seems to look at. And I'm just on guard for stuff like that. In all, it says the Post found 217 structures, 11 pieces of equipment that were damaged or destroyed, and 15 U.S. military sites. Experts who reviewed the Post analysis said the damage at the sites suggested the U.S. military, of course, had underestimated Iran's targeting abilities, not adapted sufficiently to modern drone warfare, and left some bases underprotected. Again, you had the 12-day war discussion, so you would have had access or at least a brief glimpse of their capabilities, at least to some degree. Because remember, even they said then that we've held back some of our most important things. I mean, they're kind of still saying the same thing now. I don't think it was underestimated at all. I think they were either forced into this or Trump was manipulated from Israel. The Iranian attacks were precise. There were no random craters indicating misses, which speaks to their ability to essentially pinpoint target like the other side claims to. U.S. Central Command, which has responsibility for the Middle East, declined to address the detailed summary. On the damage, it says, quote, the Iranians have deliberately targeted. Now, this is really important, I think, to the framing. Remember, they've targeted civilians all over this conversation. This is coming from the U.S. government side. It says the Iranians have deliberately targeted accommodation buildings across multiple sites with the intent to inflict mass casualties. Oh, excuse me. This is good behind the investigator with open access research, but connected to a group that I think is connected to the U.S. government. It is not just equipment, fuel storage, and airbase infrastructure under fire, but also soft targets, gyms, food halls, accommodation. Then you get why they're saying that, because they're terrorists. But I mean, think about this for a second. These are military installations. What did they say? How dare they put the point being is they've been bombing these things all over the place. And what did they say about the school being bombed? Right in the beginning, which they did. They put the school in military base. Well, turned out that wasn't even the reality, by the way. It was off the base. But what did I go to show you? Here are 50 examples of U.S. military bases that have schools on them. Exactly like they're claiming makes them a target, which I don't agree with, by the way. I think clearly Iran didn't either. The point here is that what you're trying to say is that by them bombing locations that had gyms inside of a military installation that they were trying to that's technically a legal target, the whole military installation. And you make it a mass casualty event? No, that's called war. You're bombing a military installation, and anything that they leave there during a military activity that they might, like, this is not some kind of a human shield dynamic. This is not some kind of a hypocritical statement contradicting what we said in Gaza. This is in a military base that they're claiming has a gym, and therefore you're aiming at mass casualties. I mean, this is just a wild stretch to make what everyone does in war, bombing military locations, is suddenly a war crime. I mean, isn't this just a weird way they spin this stuff? I mean, who knows if this guy is making the same argument about any other location? I don't know. But from the U.S. perspective, they will always make the most normal things they do out to be terrorism. And then they go wildly over the top and call it justified because they're not the bad guy, even though that's not the truth. Some Persian Gulf nations have refused to allow the U.S. military to conduct offensive operations out of their bases. A U.S. official said bases in Bahrain and Kuwait were two of the hardest hit. And of course, they say possibly because they permitted attack. Not possibly. Iran said that. They literally said, you guys are helping them, and that makes you targets. And of course, Kuwait and Bahrain were two of the ones that didn't seem to back away. Even the UAE seems to be pretty stoutly, staying aligned with the U.S. and Israel. And it says, including the use of high mobility artillery rockets that can fire missiles at ranges exceeding 310 miles. They hit these locations because they're legally co-belligerents in an illegal war. Again, that they told the UN they would before it even started. Iranian forces have been more resilient than Trump administration may have anticipated. And that one, is important to see that even from mainstream reporting that have been sort of gaslighting you for the war too. It says, Greco said the strategy also failed to account for the degree to which U.S. and Israeli air defenses had been used up during the 12-day war. Like, what do you mean failed to account? You feel like they just don't know that? Again, I'm the first person that will say incompetence is a huge factor here, but I just refuse to believe that. This, to me, shows you that Israel is the one making these decisions, and it was at the expense of the U.S. According to an estimate from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the military used at least 190 THAAD interceptors and 1,060 Patriot interceptors between February 28th and April 8th, representing 53% and 43% of the pre-war inventories. Over 50%, guys. And that's what that right then was when people were going, whoa, okay, they've spent this, and Iran clearly, at least as they're stating, and we've come to see them proving that, have not. And it says a U.S. and allied air defense had done an impressive job intercepting attacks, but, quote, at an enormous cost in terms of surface-to-air missile interceptors and air-to-air missiles. Which means it turns out Iran was right. They're in it for the long haul, and the U.S. was not. 228 structures. And they lied to you. They denied it all. And apparently we're still winning. Now, to get into this larger part, and this is pretty much the discussion of what Trump is lying about. Kenneth Roth points out this article from New York Times. The gullible Trump went to war in Iran, surrounded by yes men and easily bamboozled by the slick Netanyahu. Now, 2 months later, he's, quote, in confronting the complicated reality, is confronting the complicated. Let's try that again. 2 months later, he, quote, is confronting the complicated reality of a conflict that has proved costly, deeply unpopular, and lacks a clear endgame. Now, who's to say if you agree, if they're right or you agree with that? New York Times is partisan, like a lot of them, almost all of them. But what's interesting is I think this was easily identifiable earlier when they were trying to tell you that basically he was doing the right thing, just not doing it the right way, which is just always what they do, politicians and media. But now finally coming around to this and going, and by the way, admitting what, like right at the beginning, what we were talking about, how Israel's influencing the outcome. And well, you're a racist, you're anti-Semite, you're a conspiracy theorist. And now even Alex Jones and everybody else in the conversation is going, oh, Netanyahu's the one dictating this. Isn't it insane how that, and yet nobody in this mainstream alternative stands back and goes, oh yeah, Ryan was saying that back in 2024, or any number of people around us, or Adam Green for his entire career. You know, the point is, it's never happens that way because these people are not honest. And it's not about giving credit where credit is due. It's about controlling the point and using it when they need to. So now the New York Times is letting this out of the bag because I think it's about leading to the next point. You read it however you want. Because the reality in my mind is that is partly what's going on here. Trump's involved, but I think he's also being used. Now, we talked about the impending Israeli false flag on the 4th, which was addressing things that essentially happened on the 3rd into the 4th. The title was Trump blusters, lies, and fails. Again. And you could make that title for today too, by the way. The impending Israeli false flag. So let's talk about this. So first of all, just a couple of examples that I saw that I think stood out to me. And these are my opinions. There had the example of the Korean-operated vessel that was basically in the port, sort of just close to the dock, and got an explosion. Now, I haven't followed up on this because it wasn't definitive at the point or at the time yesterday. But what was interesting to me is that just jumped to it's an Iran drone attack. And hey, very well could have been. My point was, how in the world does that make sense for what Iran's trying to accomplish? If you've watched what they've been doing thus far, they're not just belligerently doing things without meaning. Clearly, what they do is very, very calculated, showing restraint, deterrence. I mean, every time showing you the opposite of what they claim they are, even if they really are that, even if it's just strategy. In this case, it doesn't make any sense for them to do this. It actually hurts their agenda. It makes them look like exactly what they're claiming. So I doubt this. I don't believe that's what happened. Or it very well could have been a random explosion they used. But so my thought was, this is something stood out to me. Then we saw the UAE accusing Iran of attacking an empty tanker, which I found interesting, especially because, for many reasons, being empty and so on in the directions. But when you look into the story, can you already guess? Well, they very clearly, on the record, did not follow the shipping routes, did not coordinate with Iran. And so Iran fired on them, didn't sink the ship, did no casualties, simply deterred them. Because, and again, whether you agree that Iran should have that power, it is the current reality. And they're saying, we'll let anybody go through except you guys who are fighting us. That is still the reality. It's not closed, restricted to the enemies. We'll let any of you go through as long as you coordinate with us through the strait. And yet we still see a massive shutdown traffic because the U.S. and Israel are still maintaining a blockade, are still pretending there's mines in the strait, and in many cases just telling people they're not allowed to go through. So that to me felt very, very coordinated, and it was used immediately by people like Naftali Bennett, who appears to be potentially the next leader of Israel. The United Arab Emirates, our strategic ally, has been attacked. This is, in effect, a declaration of the renewal of Iran's war. Let's say that on the 4th, guys. As far as I can tell, they haven't bombed Iran again. They've been bombing Lebanon every single day, and that's also a violation of their agreement, and it always has been. But overall, clearly they used this, even though it was not what actually happened, because they didn't attack them. They deterred them. No, the ship didn't sink. They weren't taken. They didn't seize them. It's just insane. That feels very manipulated to me. Then you had this. UAE's Fujairah says fire breaks out at the petroleum complex. Now, I think that's actually, I think both of them really is what he's pointing to here. But overall, after an Iranian drone attack, same point applies. Now, this one's a little bit more complex because you're talking about the UAE, who is a co-belligerent. Now, whether or not you agree with the attacking of oil infrastructure, I don't. I think it's a crime. So it would be a crime for both Iran and for anybody else. But we have the U.S. and Israel doing it all over the place. So you can make your own decision of that. The point is, it would make sense that this might be Iran. I just don't think it does for their agenda. I think it goes against what they would want to demonstrate, but maybe it was secretly done and they got caught. Whatever. The point is, all of it seen together, it feels like an organized effort to create the illusion that Iran's attacking everything, because they're not really. They're just not. These claims of them firing on all the ships, it's just not what's happening. So he comes out and goes, the war has started again. Didn't really do anything just yet. But of course, the Cradle comes out and reports what the Iranian government was saying, which we should never take their word at face value. We should question them like we do anybody, because they could lie like anybody and have. The point, though, is that we need to consider what they have to say. And it's so interesting to me that right when you have these big things and Trump makes a claim, nobody wants to tell you what the Iranian government says. Not the corporate media, who's this apparently the adversarial Democrat media who hates Trump, who seems to blindly report what Trump says and never gives you the Iranian side. It's almost like they're working with Trump. It's weird. Because what you find is that Iran comes out and goes, that's not true. we're not even there. What are they talking about? Wouldn't you find that relevant for a conversation that we're about to reach a ceasefire? It's so stupidly coordinated with the corporate media. So the Iranian military source publicly came out and said this. This was yesterday. We reported this on the show. An informed military source said Iran had no pre-planned operation targeting these areas in the UAE, adding that the incident was the result of the U.S. military. So they're claiming the U.S. military bombed this location. That's a false flag, guys. On top of that, the arguments they put out in regard to, or rather just the larger statement that was put out by Iran, said they didn't engage with the UAE anywhere except the ship that they turned around. So the idea that this is that some kind of an attack on them seems to be, at least by their claim, false. And with the evidence we have, I would side that way. But You have to decide for yourself. So I find that to stand out incredibly. So my point was, I believe what we're staring at is an obvious attempt to create a false flag to make this look like Iran is doing what they want you to think they're doing, because they're not. And then Menschelson points this out. Now this is going into the 5th and the 6th. This one's from the 5th here. This post larger from the 6th. He says, well, first on the 5th, he says, China-owned oil tanker, Interstellar, crossing the Strait of Hormuz this morning if it doesn't stop before. Look, the plan was to go through the strait, right? Using Iranian-approved routes. Now, according to the U.S. government, that's not supposed to be allowed right now, and that they will stop them. Now, China has said that they weren't going to let them anymore, that they were going to push back. Larger point just being they weren't going to allow, they weren't going to follow the sanction discussions from the U.S. anymore. They were going to go through, and they were advising anybody they work with to ignore it as well. Then he follows up today and says the U.S. spends several millions for Project Freedom, whatever that even amounts to. 2 merchant ships hit. Now, we're going to talk about that. Project failed after 2 days. Now, what we do have, by the way, is, where was it real quick? This is from today. This is a ship in Strait of Hormuz. It was same thing, sort of fire, like turned around, guys. That's what we're really talking about. So in this case, we'll come back to the whether that's really, like, this simply says 2 ships fired on, hit. China does nothing. Second ship crossing the strait in 24 hours following their routes. So all they're really highlighting here, guys, is that they're not being stopped. Now, that's not to say that there's not an effort to stop them. But the idea being that clearly Trump's blustering and China tries to go through and they let it. Or Iran, in many cases, is still getting tankers through for their oil. But that's not, so this is what's interesting, is that it seems the blockade is aimed at the world. They need to team up against Iran and larger against Iran in some cases. But what I'm trying to highlight here is a larger agenda that seems to be not so much about stopping everything, but just about the impression, the illusion of what you think is happening. Or even more so, which speaks to something that a lot of people are pointing out, that it's really about getting everybody else to get oil from the U.S. So it really wouldn't even be about Iran or anybody else. It's about them. Either way, there's a lot of ways to look at it. So in regard to those ships, though, what we have to understand is, we'll come to that one I pointed to in a second, which is still up in the air because apparently Iran hasn't said anything about it. But if you look at the data, it's provable. It was not following the shipping lanes. So it's the same conversation. No matter what anybody's saying, these ships are choosing to violate what Iran says is the current legal reality of the strait. And then they get fired on and turn them back. And that becomes, they're firing on all the ships, but they're not firing on all the ships. They're firing on the ones that will not follow the shipping routes. It just becomes so tiresome that we have to state the same usual things because everybody seems to be either lying or not aware of these things. Now, to the reality of what happened from yesterday and to today and the idea of what we were covering. First, the U.S. Central Command. And here, like I was saying, on the 4th and the 3rd, what we get is a few days later, a week later, you get to look back. And based on the reality of the situation, it becomes self-evident that somebody lied, right? Okay. So on the 4th, CENTCOM says Iranian state media claims Iran's Revolutionary Guard hit a warship with 2 missiles. Truth? No Navy ships have been struck. Well, that's not really what this was about, because their claim was our ships went through the strait. They did not. And surprise, surprise, you can prove that with GPS. Look at oiltankers.com. All the different places are going, yeah, they lied about that. Didn't happen. So this was what they, so what I couldn't decipher was whether or not they were actually hit. Because as we showed you, the Pentagon said 2 missiles, neither of the missiles hit. There's no way to misunderstand that. They were fired on. That's the story. And the U.S. turned around and went back. So what they effectively did was lie about the fact right here, where he says 2 commercial ships along with destroyers have already safely transited the strait. So they're lying, okay? And so what they turned it into essentially was they just didn't hit us. And see, we can prove that. Well, maybe you can even prove that you weren't hit. The story was not even about whether you were hit. It was the fact that you were deterred from crossing the strait as you were claiming the strait was open and you were winning. So my point is, you can prove that they're lying about this whole story. Laura Logan says, taking Iranian state media at their words, I guess, is like getting your stats on Gaza from Hamas terrorists, Ministry of Health. kind of clear to see where she's coming from, right? These people say whatever they want and no one holds them accountable. Are you actually serious? Like, I was floored by this. Now, we shouldn't trust the Iranian government. No, duh. Obviously, any government shouldn't be taken at face value. But you have track records and precedents. And the reality here, first of all, Hamas was demonstrably shown to be correct about what they were saying, you know, in a large, broader sense over Israel. Now, plenty of examples of Hamas lying, plenty of examples are, numerous I covered of them even breaking the law, because you could prove that. But the point about the lies, the human shield, I mean, if you ask her right now, I'm willing to bet you that she'd go human shields, beheaded babies like all the rest of them. So what's frustrating to me is that you make the comment about not taking them at face value and then literally take at face value as you take at face value what one of the most verifiably dishonest governments in the world claims. Even if you want to claim Iran is more dishonest, the U.S. is demonstrably dishonest. It's recorded. Seems silly, Laura, to say, don't do that, but I'm going to do it with them. We should be questioning the claims of every government and doing our due diligence. If done, one can easily see who is lying here. And that's my point, is now, to be clear, you can prove they're lying about this. And her statement now was back then was saying you should be listening to them. Now, this one is from the 5th, where he again says 2 commercial ships along with American destroyers have already safely transited the strait. And she says the U.S. is the only Navy that can project power all over the world. I don't know why that's something you would, is that, it's just funny how the argument is sort of like the opposite of what we always, so it's like America first, but globalism and our power over everybody. Is that the good thing? I mean, it's just weird to me. But at the same time, sustained over time. Now, these aren't even true statements, by the way, if you want to be honest about it. And as such, keeps the world's shipping lanes open for every nation on Earth all the time. Okay, I'm of the mind that we're watching sort of the dying old media trying to work its way into what people everywhere now see what's going on. These old sentiments, this idea that America's bringing freedom to the world, like, that's laughable, guys. It's not an anti-American sentiment, even if you feel that way. It's an objective fact. They're not doing that. Even if you want to claim they're trying and failing, which would be more of an accurate way to frame, but it's just silly to me. But keeps the world shipping, you mean aside from all the ones they attack? You mean aside from the people they sanction and manipulate? Aside from God dang it, it's frustrating. Sorry, I shouldn't even say it like that. It just actually frustrates me that people constantly push these things. The American taxpayer bears the cost. Yeah, exactly. And it says, I find it telling that you seem to take at face value what the U.S. government claims, at a time when it's never been more obvious that you can't take at face value what the government claims. No government should be blindly trusted. It's a blind spot, Laura. Saeed Mohammed Barandi, talking about the ships that we're pointing to over there, claiming they went to the strait when we know they didn't. Why doesn't the Trump regime name the 2 ships that supposedly left the Persian Gulf? Why would we be happy to learn their names? Daniel McAdams says, just like the, quote, rescued pilots, sources always trust me, bro. You see, it's just so silly. Daniel McAdams is a very respectable person. You can disagree with him. The point is that somebody like this at least has, it's objectively obvious. We can prove that didn't happen. So my point in showing you that other post is to say they're standing there making this big statement on a post that we now can prove is false. Just reflect on that, guys, and it's everywhere. On that note, Jesse Waters. The U.S. Navy just crushed Iran's Mosquito fleet and unlocked the Strait of Hormuz, May 4th. So let's just address the strait. So we can, this is my point as always, where it is now the 6th. Is the strait open? Is it not restricted like we know it was against their adversary? No, it still is the same way. So when he says unlock the strait, and all the same sorter types out there said, we did it, the strait's open, like they've done like 11 times over the last month because Trump says it, they sell it, even though it's not true. Yeah, they're wrong, guys. That's stupid. It's wrong. This guy on a major Fox News platform with millions of followers just literally lied to them or doesn't know he's wrong. Great journalism. On top of that, he says they crushed the Mosquito fleet. Well, let's talk about that. America flexed its muscle without a single boot on the ground. You mean aside from all the boots on the ground? You just can't laugh at these guys enough. You realize they reported that there are boots in the ground. We know that. And I'm not even talking about the things they manipulate other than, it's just, anyway. it's just embarrassing how many, I get the reason I do that is like, I check myself. It's like, you guys know this, but I always want to speak to the people out there that may still be on the fence about what these people are. And it says, we saved the world's energy and didn't even call our allies. What do you mean you saved the world's energy? You mean the increasing cost that we're all paying, or the fact that the situation hasn't changed, Jesse Waters? How did you save the world's energy? So all he's doing is going, here's what Trump said. And that statement means we did all these things. Only problem is, only issue is that didn't happen at all. But other than that, great job, Jesse. Great job. So Al Jazeera points out, and you shouldn't trust any platform blindly. This is just the platform that I'm pointing to now. You can check this stuff for yourself. And if we haven't come to terms with the idea of what was going on in Venezuela, the bombing of boats that we have proven, like many people have, using the information that is readily available at this point, that they were not doing what they claimed. In some cases, there was an overlap. The one, actually, what's funny is the one they actually arrested and didn't just bomb, which says something. They go, look at all the drugs we're finding. It's funny how that every other one of them you bomb without investigation, but the one you happen to stop, we got the drugs, which seemed to imply the rest of them might not have had drugs. Either way, they're in the middle of international waters. In fact, might be going to countries that do not have the same drug laws as we do. In the world that you can pretend that that's somehow justified to just murder people on fishing boats, when you can prove that there were innocent people from, like, well-known fishermen from certain locations that were going, you killed, or families were saying, you killed my father. So my point is that we know that they're doing that around the world. And we also shouldn't even quibble about the fact that the U.S. government has no qualms about killing innocent people. Again, the fact that I even need to qualify that statement today, or that people might think I should qualify, is just mind-blowing to me. 6 Iranian boats targeted by the U.S. government in the Strait of Hormuz were not Iranian boats. They were civilian vessels carrying goods and passengers, and 5 people were killed in the attack. This is where it gets even more disgusting, as Rubio and the rest are now trying to point to fishermen that were killed as if they starved to death because of the blockade. These people were murdered. And this is the point about Gaza and the rest. This is not an enclosed, controlled area. This is public. The point is, there's a lot of other things that can see this, whether from satellite GPS or just people that are associated with this, or Iranians or other people. And the reality is that you can show that these were not what they claimed. Now, if you disagree with that, show me where the U.S. government is breaking down the reality of the evidence that proves that they were Iranian vessels. They don't, and they won't, because the reality is the opposite. Ow, sorry, let's hit my hand on the table. So here is Saeed Mohammed Randi saying, fake news, the Trump administration struck 2 civilian boats and murdered 5 civilians. Never expect anything but propaganda from BBC, excuse me. U.S. strikes Iranian fast boats as Iran attacks UAE oil facility. Well, look at that. Right? The same facility that Iran said they didn't attack, and they could be lying, that says the U.S. attacked. And the logic of that, I mean, like we went over it already. You can suss through that for yourself. To me, how this all plays together feels exactly like what I was worrying about as a basic setup to create the illusion. I mean, to pretend that you got to win when it's so obvious that you failed in every possible way in this agenda. So not only are they, I guess, floundering and sort of taking juvenile action in response to failed efforts to make it look like they didn't lose, just turning around and just bombing a bunch of civilian vessels and saying it's Iranian. I mean, it's no different than the ones by Venezuela. Mohammed Safa, formerly of the UN, if the United States is at war, and this is really important, so you may disagree with what I just said, please look into the evidence. If the United States is at war, then Pete Hegseth is a war criminal. If the United States is not at war, then he's a murderer. Now, whatever you think about this, the reality of the legality of the war is not even, I mean, they'll dispute it, but you can read it for yourself. The imminent threat was proven to not be there by their own assessments. So there is no legal situation where this exists. And especially since they restarted some new one, even though that doesn't make sense anyway, there is still no imminent threat right now. So there's no world in which what they're doing is legal. So whatever boat you think they bombed, whatever you think the boat was, the same point applies. What Pete Hegseth ordered the military to do violates international law. The civilian boats were going from Oman to Iran. The U.S. Army deliberately targeted 2 boats and killed 5 civilians. Under the Geneva Conventions, you are obligated to rescue a crew of the ship that you sink. Abandon any survivors and leaving them to drown is illegal and a war crime. Pete Hegseth, war crimes trials is going to be historic. Now, Pete Hegseth, May 5th, says 4 decades, Iran has extorted the whole world by weaponizing the Strait of Hormuz to their terroristic will. I mean, really think about this. Like, even what they've been saying before has always been, Iran, terrorist, bad guy. And sure, you may think that, aside from the lack of evidence to back that up. But now you're just redesigning, reimagining history. The strait was open before this. This was not there's always been the floated worry that they might, though something's coming, but weirdly never develops. So now they start the illegal war. Iran restricts them. Really important to understand that. Not everybody else. And they then initiate their own blockade because they clearly want the world to be suffering because of this so they can make it about Iran. And then you turn around and say they've extorted the whole world for decades? How do you even make sense of that? But to be clear, by weaponizing the strait, which they haven't done before this. I don't know how you don't see this as anything but desperation. They know anybody with a brain who cares to look is going to be able to prove that's not true. But he says it anyway. So you either are watching the controlled demolition of our country by a foreign power, or you're watching somebody so incompetent and so desperate that the only thing they can do is lie through their teeth and just cross their fingers and hope you don't see it. As Daniel McAdams says, this is completely and demonstrably untrue. What's wrong with this person? He says, Project Freedom will crush and threat and reopen the global commerce trade. Your blockade is what's currently stopping that. Iran's efforts are stopping their enemies. The U.S. blockade is stopping the world transit. Now, even though they claim that we're only looking at Iran, it's clear that what they're doing by keeping that there is making everybody pull back because they're worried something's going to happen. Even though Iran's saying, you guys can go through. And well, what about the bombs? What about the mines? Well, what about the insurance? What about Israel threatening me? All those things are happening. Adam points out, in regard to what Rubio says here, let me play this first, actually. I have a few clips from Rubio that are embarrassing. This is from the 5th.
This is an international waterway. Okay, this is
Incorrect.
an international waterway.
Incorrect.
And international law is very clear, and I love it because everybody always talks about international law, and this international law on this is very clear. International waterways.
The same international law, by the way, that they don't follow. The same international law that they say doesn't apply. The same international law that Israel says never applies to them. On the record, numerous times. But go ahead, let us know why it matters to us now, because Iran did something, and now international law suddenly means everything.
No country can control them. There is no international law that allows you to say, I'm going to put mines in an international body of water.
Well, there's no mines, as far as I can tell, and it's not an international body of water for the 4th time.
And I'm going to blow up ships that don't listen to us.
Didn't happen. Again, guys, if you want to pretend that, feel free. The evidence does not back that up. It's not what's happening. At the very worst, they're deterring these ships and turning them around. I can prove that to you. So you see how he's barely in the non-international waterway. I've never seen anybody. Do you realize that if they thought they were mines and they really wanted to prove it to you, they would show you one. They would make the case. Even Trump said they were going through removing them like a couple of weeks ago. Now suddenly we didn't. They're there. You just have to laugh at how stupid and desperate this is.
Try to go through. That's what Iran is doing. This is a criminal act. And someone needs to do something about it. Something needs to be done. It's completely illegal, completely illegitimate.
Well, why don't you do something? Aren't you the one literally at war to do something? What are you doing? Somebody please do something about the thing we started that we're failing at. I don't know how you don't feel embarrassed by this, Rubio.
And completely unacceptable. And that's why the United States military is guiding stranded commercial ships safely through the strait.
Or not, or not at all, or completely lying about that and being turned around. And it's just, oh man, I've just somebody, I've said this for years about watching this. It's like somebody used to make like a sitcom or something. Like, this is going to be laughed at. This whole thing is going to be looked back on. And it is something like in a whole league of its own. whatever they're doing and how embarrassing this is. Like, because you have to understand, at some point you can look back. I mean, right now you can look at it and see, but you will be able to look back and be like not politically invested in the moment and be like, what in the world were they doing right there? Just lying. And I'm not even talking about the dispute of what we think is happening. I'm talking about the fundamentals of this that you can prove are dishonest from the core point, like caring about international law or anything else he's saying.
And is working to restore freedom of navigation and putting an end to these efforts to hold the global economy hostage.
Yeah, well,
this is an
economy hostage. Right, your efforts are to stop. Your efforts are to stop your blockade. It's just beyond it, man. It's over the top. So here, it finally goes up. There we go. He says, as Adam writes, well, there's also isn't international law that allows blockading a civilian population. There's also no international law that allows bombing schools of children. There's also no international law that allows preemptive strikes based on no threat. There's no international law that allows genocide with a real estate interest. There's no, I mean, think about the goal it takes to stand up and say, the international law doesn't allow the things they're not doing, Iran, while knowing that you have publicly flouted international law in 15 different ways and you're currently committing a genocide. This is just, it's beyond the pale, guys. You think people don't see this? I mean, Americans may have an issue with it. You think the world doesn't see this? As Robert Barnes, the lawyer who used to support Trump, says, FYI, the Strait is territorial waters. Now, guys, you don't need to be a brain surgeon to understand this, or whatever you would call it, a navigational expert. It is very clear. And in fact, actually, I'll do this really quickly. Hold on. I can just play this and I'll come back to this.
We wanted to do was show
right there. So what you could see here, this is a clip I'll play in a second. But what this clip will talk about is the change Iran's taken in control of the Strait. But what I'm actually, that's not even that good. Let me just go back to I might as well just show it really quickly. It's not that hard to show. The point is about the reality of where the lines are. Oh, that's right. I was going to open the map. I don't need to do that. Hold on one second. Now I'm wasting time. There we go. Okay, back to this. Grab the same map. I'll include it in the show notes. And look at this one. This is actually the one I was thinking of anyway, because it does a good job of showing the line between international and regional waters. So we'll go to just tankers. So it's very clear. As always, what you can see, the gray lines, right? This side is Iranian waters. Right, Larak Island here, that's Iranian territorial waters. On this side is Oman territorial waters. As you can see, there is no international water. That's international water right there, right? So is this here. But at the choke point, which is the whole point, there's no way to get past this without crossing through territorial waters. And Oman is one of the ones that was arguing, basically in regard to Iran and offering everything that they wanted on the 28th, and Israel bombed them anyway. So that is not international waters. That's territorial waters. And that's why Iran is doing this. So think about how silly this is, that they have to lie about that. You don't think that their team knows that? Like, this is my point. Lutnick and everybody, every single person around them, all these Fox News commentators, all the people that are all MAGA team sport supporters who are just not stupid, they know that. They know when they're lying. Let's even make it more specific, because many people may not even know. The experts, right? All the Fox News regional guys, all the ones like you just saw, Rubio, he knows he's lying to you. That's a deliberate choice to misrepresent the reality so you don't know you're wrong. I just think you have to understand that. So, Wyatt Reed, speaking about international law, like as he sits there and gripes about how they don't care about international law, well, here is the civilian bridge among many that United States bombed in Iran. As Wyatt Reed writes, international law, extremely clear. Bombing bridges is a war crime. Local officials told me the B-1 bridge, which was bombed on April 2nd, my birthday, still had a 1 meter gap between sides where the U.S. struck it. And let's be clear, this is not even debatable. Trump publicly told you he was going to do this. I don't know why. He'll be, if there is any justice, he'll be in front of the Hague addressing that. So will Biden, for the same reasons for the genocide in Gaza. The point is that this is something he admitted to, and there's no debating it. It's a crime. And with bunker buster bombs, and killed 13 innocent people. And here's the report from White Reed. You should listen to it. Now, here's Nick Sorter of the new media, who says, wow, flashing red light. That's how you know it's important. Marco Rubio is going hard against the UN from the podium. Time to defund the United Nations. Just always laugh at these people that just go, whatever they said. I support the current thing. Like all the ones that love to make fun of the Democrats with their flags. You're the same thing, Nick. Exactly the same. I support what they said today because I'm a fake journalist. Well, here's what Rubio said. Wrong one. This one.
So we're going to take it to the UN, and we're going to give it another chance to be a forum in which we're not even asking people like commit troops to the region and help blow up the Iranian boats. All we're asking them to do is to condemn it, to call on Iran to stop blowing ships.
Okay. I thought the UN was Hamas. Didn't you guys just spend years telling us the UN was an ineffectual, useless thing that shouldn't be there and that they're basically Hamas? Now you want Hamas to condemn what they're doing? Didn't you tell us Iran is the same thing, though? Like, maybe you want to get your narrative straight here, because based on what you've said over the years, all these things are the same thing collectively fighting you. But so simultaneously, you want to work with one of the parts of that to condemn the other part that you claim they work with. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Rubio. But understand what he's really doing is saying the UN has to step in because they can't do anything. Or at the very least, they don't want to take another step that will be condemned by their own people. Israel seems to be okay with that and might be the one to do it anyway. They failed, guys. You need to understand this at this point. For them to turn to the UN and say, do something, is so weak. It shows you they are not succeeding in their agendas, because if they go to the group that they tell you shouldn't be involved and now want them to be involved, it's because they're trying to shuck responsibility. And on top of that, the very UN, the legal realities of the United Nations resolutions and general charter show you that they're breaking the law.
Remove these mines and to allow humanitarian relief to come through, because there's...
Got it. So they want the UN to go remove the mines that aren't there. But do nothing, though. Just condemn it, but then go do the thing that we claim we already did. You can't laugh at this enough, guys.
Humanitarian aid that's trapped. That's it. This is a very modest request.
Oh, my God. By the way, I actually missed that last time. Check this out. Listen to this again.
Call on Iran to stop blowing ships, to remove these mines, and to allow humanitarian relief to come through, because there's...
Oh, my God. Think about the gall it takes to do that. You're claiming that it's the blockade, that you're the one collecting. Iran is not blocking anything but you guys. Your blockade is stopping whatever, if anything's being stopped, which I doubt it even is, to be what they're pointing to. I doubt that's even the reality, frankly. But if it is, it's because of you. And what you're actually saying, you actually are arguing that what they're doing is stopping humanitarian aid, while still to this very moment, you're restricting humanitarian aid in Gaza. To this very moment, you're doing that in many locations, by the way. I haven't talked about Yemen in that regard for a very long time, but they did the same thing there. How about Venezuela, when they sent in trucks full of barbed wire and pretended they were stopping humanitarian aid? I mean, think about how gross that. I mean, this is my larger point, as always. In fact, I have a tweet that I put out somewhat like this. We'll get to later. A monster, murderers, you're a monster, right? You're a monster for doing the evil thing. But it's a next level type of villainy, type of evil, to not just do the bad thing, but then stand up and claim you're the hero. And not only that, but ask for praise while you're committing genocide. And then try to flip the script and say you're the one doing evil things and accuse them of what you're literally doing. There's nothing more evil than that in my mind. You realize that, like, committing, like, you're genociding people, you're starving children, you're supporting an agenda of people who rape their people in prison. You know the old statement, you could judge a society by how they treat their prisoners? Look at Israel. The people that were defending, arguing you had the right to rape them in prison. And if you still don't know that, you are lost, because this was publicly defended on their mainstream TV. I digress. Understand how disgusting it is for him to stand here and act like they're doing that when, first of all, I don't see any evidence of that. Secondly, you're doing that all around the world. And anyway, somebody needs to make a point about that.
Humanitarian aid that's trapped. That's it. This is a very modest request. And if you're telling me that the international community and hundreds of countries cannot rally behind that, then I don't know what the utility of the UN system is.
Yeah, not really. I don't, only the utility of it would have been in this one moment to stand up and actually stop you guys from doing a massive genocide. The fact that they haven't convinces me, like I always thought, that they're completely toothless tiger, useless at this point. But what's interesting is you still want to use them when you want to use them. But overall, what was the point here too? What did he say? Hold on.
And hundreds of countries cannot rally behind that.
So
then I don't know what the
get around what we made up about this story, then I don't know what it's for. Well, that's the point, Verbio. They don't get around it because everyone actually sees this. Now, usually they don't care because they're just as sociopathic as you. The difference is they know you're failing. The difference is they know you can't succeed in what you're trying to accomplish unless you go nuclear war. So they're not helping. When he stands up and goes, let's bring ships through the strait, and everyone's like, no, thank you. Even the UK was like, we'll find something different. Very clearly, everyone's like, nope, we don't want to get involved. It's obvious. And so what he's trying to do is just make it about them.
Utility of the UN system is, if it can't even solve something as straightforward as that. And I think to both the Chinese and the Russians, I would argue and have argued that it is in their interest for that resolution to pass and for pressure to be brought on Iran, because it is in their interest not to see international waterways, including the Straits of Hormuz, be closed down and cause economic chaos.
Of course it is. Which is why we just showed you a Chinese tanker busting their blockade. Not Iran's blockade, Trump's blockade, which they apparently weren't able to stop or didn't want to. That speaks for itself.
To dozens and dozens of countries around the world. Okay.
Okay. Well, as I said, evidenced by the never, basically, so what he's saying is, they're breaking international law and we have to step up and do something. And I said, evidenced by the never-ending string of lies and bluster from the Trump administration, this is essentially now the U.S. government begging Iran to let them use the strait again, while hiding behind the lie that it's closed for everyone and they have control, which they do not. It's not closed for everyone and they don't have control. Again, but I thought the UN was Hamas. But realize, guys, think about this. So effectively what you're doing right here by going, UN, do something. They have to get in and open the waterways because they're blocking the strait. Well, you are begging them to take. How does that demonstrate you hold all the cards? How does that demonstrate that you're in control of anything? If you're literally begging them to step in, or if the word beg makes you feel like I'm being too personal, whatever. Because he's not begging. I'm just using that to say like the essentially what he's doing is hiding behind the idea of what he's presenting. And what it shows you is that they are not in control of the situation. Or let's just take the point of they're controlling the strait, or that Iran's begging for a deal and they're just waiting for the right moment. Then why would any of this be happening? Why would they need the UN to step in? Why would they need them to condemn the thing that they claim they can stop? I don't even need to make these points. The only people who actually believe them are either blind followers or people too dumb to see it or people lying for the agenda. I'm of the mind that the vast majority of people are not this stupid because you could look and go, well, that's a lie. So they're stupid. And as Shael Ben Ephraim points out, this is literally the funniest moment in the history of American foreign policy, where Rubio essentially says the goal of the thing is to go back to where we were at square one. We knew this is where it was going to go.
It's a real test for the UN, right? As a function, as something that functions that can solve global problems. What is the purpose of the UN? The UN was supposed to be a place where you could peacefully resolve.
Hold on, I think I got the wrong one. Hold on.
As President,
let me see. I think it's this one here.
As President Trump has said, and the facts clearly bear out, the United States of America holds all the cards. There is no scenario here in which if they decide to join a ladder of escalation, they wind up getting the last say.
Okay, well, that's why this was back to back. I mean, so there's you hold all the cards in your control, but you need the UN to step in, and because Iran's with the blockade, and we need the resolution because this is affecting global trade. So why don't you stop it? If you hold all the cards, stop them. Pretty simple, isn't it? Do something about it. They don't. I mean, we're militarily powerful and we have all the cards and we can do everything and they're begging for a deal, but they'll please stop them for us. It's just embarrassing. Now, the other part of this, of course, the joke to make is about the idea of the meme that utterly destroyed them, where they said, we have all the cards, and made an Uno reference. Anybody who's ever played Uno goes, well, the goal is to get rid of your cards. You guys are just failing in every possible way. But so that's where this kind of statement comes from. But I don't know how you could not laugh at this with what he just was doing.
President Trump has said, and the facts clearly bear out, the United States of America holds all the cards. There is no scenario here in which if they decide to join a ladder of escalation, they wind up getting the last say. But
that's the point right there. What does that mean? Well, we'll if no matter what happens, we'll nuke them or whatever, right? Well, the last say has nothing to do with whether or not you succeed in your agenda. The last say has nothing to do with whether or not Americans are killed or not. All it means is what you care about is punishing them at the last moment for what they did to us. So if you know that's where it's going, that proves that you know that your bombing was not about restraint or about de-escalation, which it never is, by the way. You bomb them and they bomb back. You bomb them, and then you know that's where it's going to go. And you're basically saying, if you keep going, we're going to go even further. I mean, we're dealing with children here, or belligerents, or people that aren't even in control. Because what you're ultimately saying is, we will give you what you know, at the end of the day, we'll make it hard for you. But yeah, let's not worry about the Americans that are suffering, or the gas prices that are rising, or all the things you're causing. They're just lying about every part of this agenda.
our preference is for these straits to be opened to the way they're supposed to be opened, back to the way it was.
Where they started. Yeah, right, exactly.
Anyone can use it. No mines in the water.
Wasn't there before. Right. So before you open this illegal war, that's exactly what the reality was. So what you're now begging Iran is to go put it back the way it was before we broke it.
Nobody paying tolls. That's what we have to get back to, and that's the goal here.
Yeah. Okay. So he just effectively told you the goal is to not get what you wanted, not achieve any of your goals, but to simply go back to where you were. But I thought they were all terrorists. I thought they were holding the world hostage. I thought all of these things. Well, if you just simply go back to the way it was, well, that's what was happening before, where you were also saying, I mean, here's this is how bad they are at this. We just showed you the thing where they were saying, where Hegseth was telling you, they have been doing this for decades, right? Okay. So why would Rubio then want to go back to the way it was before the 28th if they'd been holding you hostage for decades? So you want to go back to being held hostage by Iran? Well, let's be clear. That's not what was happening. But you just have to laugh at how their inconsistent narratives show you that they are drowning in their own bullshit. BS. I was close. I just think it's obvious. So, continuing. Rubio says the U.S. has achieved objectives in Iran operation. Now, ultimately, I'm going to have to wrap here pretty soon. So I might just go, I'm not going to go through all this. The simple point of this was that that's not true. I mean, it's just embarrassing for them to go through and act like they've achieved their goals when their goals have not been achieved. Like, objectively, what they claimed hasn't happened. And all they're now doing is repositioning it like we kind of knew they were, to say, if we can stop them from getting a nuclear bomb, then we win. They never had one, and they were never seeking one, according to their own U.S. information. So you effectively have then got, because you didn't get what you want, you're going to go, well, let's just tell them that where we started is where we ended up, and that means we won. But even worse than that, they're not even going to get where they started, because Iran's not going to give the toll. And in fact, what appears to be the reality is Iran is going to push into their maintaining their civilian nuclear program, not weapons, but civilian nuclear program, even though they'd offered to give it up before the 28th. And how much you want to bet that even doing that, Trump's going to claim he did it? He got them to do that. He got them to say they don't want nukes. That's what he's actually claiming today. Trump is literally saying they've agreed to give up their nukes. Surprise, surprise, it's not actually what happened. I mean, literally, I'll go to it toward the end. Iran is going, that's not true. That didn't happen. So Trump's either being lied to, or he's yet again using these lies to get people lots and lots of money using insider information. And in the article, they discussed the conversation of the nuclear. It's the same thing as always. If you don't understand the reality of the point that they were at, of the 1,000 pounds of 60% enriched uranium that was legally within the agreements they made with the IAEA well after the JCPOA, meaning it was not a crime. It was not indicative of nuclear weapons. It was simply a 60% enriched uranium situation that was allowed within their agreement. And if you don't understand how far that is away from actually having a bomb, let alone one that could be used the way they claim, educate yourself. Don't be like Witkoff, who clearly has no idea what he's talking about, according to himself, but yet still somehow is involved in these negotiations. That's very obvious. But if you want to know more, read these quotes, because here's the White House knowingly lying to you or not even knowing what they're talking about. Israel, now, in the point in the article was simply saying about violations of ceasefire, and Israeli attacks killed dozens within days in Lebanon. That was 2 days ago. They've never stopped bombing Lebanon. In Iran's mind, as they stated publicly, that is part of this, and they know that. And Israel's continued to bomb. So they've maintained the reality that they made sure would not lead to what they claim they want, which is a ceasefire. And on top of that, Israel bombed the southern the southern suburbs of Beirut today. It never stops. This is illegal bombings of civilian locations. They're literally murdering buildings full of people, bombing entire villages, and the whole world seems to be ignoring it. And on top of that, they're telling you right now, as we showed you earlier with the UAE point, Israel telling you this is going to start with Iran. Again, we have additional targets ready. Israel warns of more strikes on Iran. Now, should the U.S. government stop its positioning, I guarantee Israel's going to push this further. They always have. Now, the one from today, I think it was more than one. The point is, this is the one I can actually discuss. It's like all the rest of them. As of right now, and as always, over the next couple of days, it'll become more clear. What I can prove is that they did not follow the routes. Iran has yet to speak up about it. It seems that nobody's taken credit for what they claim happened. What it says is basically a missile hit the vessel. But like all the rest of them, it doesn't appear that there's any casualties. It's sort of a deterrent, which seems to line up with what we know they're doing. Oh, here's the map of the new waterway we'll get into in a second. Trump on Tuesday said the effort we briefly paused amid talks in the broader deal. So Trump is literally saying, we just threatened to bomb you if you don't do the thing, and then says, oh, well, we'll postpone that because, well, we're having good conversations, which didn't happen. No surprise there. It's what he keeps doing. But Tehran, meanwhile, has issued a map of the waterway, expanding a zone it said was subject to control. So as Trump's going, no, we're having a good talk, Iran's going, no, we're not, and we're showing you what we're controlling. It's pretty sad how this keeps going. And how that's not embarrassing to Trump, I have no idea. But my point is to understand, if what keeps happening are the ships that ignore Iran's control structure through the Strait, whether you agree with it or not, they're trying to cause this. They're trying to cause a problem. But at this point, the whole world knows that Iran is doing this. So if they go through and don't follow these routes, they're welcoming an attack. And it's not an attack to sink the ship. It's clearly deterrence because they keep doing it the same way. So you can't call it terrorism. You have to only call it what it is. Deterrence from their illegal actions in the Strait, according to Iran's control of the Strait. So, but my point is, they're pointing to these things, acting like it proves what they are, or what they claim they are anyway. So here's the video of the Strait. We'll play really quickly. Drop site news. Iran today, this was the 6th, launched what's called Persian Gulf Strait Authority. Now, this is what's so important about this, is I keep showing you. They're collaborating with their neighbors. They're working with the UN. I mean, they're making a public effort to make this a legal discussion regarding infrastructure, the whole thing. It represents a new government body and mechanism designed to formalize and regulate Iranian control over the passing of the Strait of Hormuz. And this is what's so embarrassing for the Trump administration. This wasn't happening before they kicked this off. And it even wasn't happening when they tried to make an agreement, when Iran was willing to go to the table. And then they bombed them. And then they murdered Khamenei. And then they said, it's too much, we're done. And there, on the 28th, they were willing to get rid of their program. Now they're not. Before that, they weren't closing the strait. Now they are, or restricting it. Before that, they weren't trying to get tolls. Now they are. That's all because of their illegal war. And it's just no way to deny that. Ships seeking transit must now obtain authority through the official permit system. Again, this is no different than the Strait of or the Suez Canal or Panama Canal. It's the same kind of situation in most of these major waterways. So the point is, here's the video showing you their new effort to broaden this out. But as even he'll tell you, simply in response to what the U.S. continues to do. So had they pulled away, this would have ended a long time ago. As even the U.S. was saying when this first started, Iran's admitted more than once. And if you can look at the actual process, it's been pretty clear that they tried to do that. Even the last negotiation where they said, look, we'll open the strait again in regard to you. You're the only ones restricted. We will stop that if you agree to this part of it in regard to just the strait. And they said no. And now they want to claim the only thing they want is the strait. Then why didn't you agree to the one before? Because I don't think they want any of this. I think it's about lies to keep this going for a different agenda.
The expansion of the new Strait of Hormuz area, as it's now being contained by the Iranians. For them, this is pivotal, right? This is their ace in the hole. They have control of the Persian Gulf. And now, because of what they say are the United States actions, they've actually expanded the control of the Persian Gulf. And there's also a tactical reason why they did this. I want to show you something now. See that city there, Fujairah? That's where one of the main oil fields is for the UAE. Now, you see that black line that's going from there all the way to there? See that black line? That is an oil pipeline. And that pipeline essentially is the UAE's way of getting oil out without having to worry about traveling through the Strait of Hormuz, because the exit for that pipeline was outside of the Strait of Hormuz. So what the Iranians have now done is,
Well, isn't that interesting what we're just talking about? So a couple ways you could look at it. This very well could be a response to what the UAE was doing, which I argue is effectively working with them to frame Iran for doing things. And this is their response, right? I mean, and this would be a tit for tat war situation, right? Or you could simply argue that this is the UAE, who's always been on the side of the US and Israel in this agenda, and they recognize the effort to circumvent the control of the strait. So from a strategic perspective, that would be the effort to stop that. Now, whatever you think of the legalities, that's not the point in my mind here. It's just about acknowledging the strategy of it. It's hard to say in this regard, because if the entire thing was started with an illegal war, at the very least, you can always go back to the point and say what's happening is the responsibility of the one who initiated an illegal war. But anything that happens within that illegally is still a fault of Iran if they break the law. So the question is, do you find the Strait control illegal? Which I think it's pretty obvious that that's not the case based on all of the comparative world circumstances. But on top of that, is it illegal for them to extend the control to a certain further location? Well, that's a good question, right? Because at this point now you're very much crossing in. Well, actually, what we should do is go back and look at the map again. I'm pretty certain that there's an opening right there for international waters, right? So now that opens the door to an element of actually talking about international water control. But if you look at the other points, the other straits and other canals and stuff, there's similar overlaps you'll find where the main location is in regard to a certain control point, but there are different overlaps when you broaden out. Either way, it seems to be a response to what's being done to them. It's interesting to think about, though, because as always, regardless of the justification, if they bomb a school or hospital, regardless of what they claim I still find that a crime, no matter who does it. In this case, if that does effectively break the law, which if it is international waters, that would cross that line, then that would be the case. And I think that's important. Now, the other point to add is whether or not these lines are exact. So that's why it's important to let these things flesh out a little further, get some exact mapping and locations from what they claim and compare it, which we will do, and we'll find out.
they've expanded the Strait of Hormuz area that they are in control of to go beyond the point where Fujairah is. And that's extremely significant because it means now that they control even more of the output of the hydrocarbons, the oil, the LNG, the fertilizer, all the stuff that's coming out of this region, and most particularly the most important region of all, which is the UAE. So that's
strategically, that's very important, right? Like just in the war they're fighting with the U.S. government for the very control of the global, kind of like the not choke point, but a release valve, something that can be dictating or at least having an effect on the global supply chain, like energy wise. And so in this case, it's a smart move because what you're doing is capping off another element for them to use to get around what you're doing. And and again, all this is aimed at pressuring the U.S. and Israel and effectively turning what was a weak point for them into a strength against the people using it against them. It was very well played. But at the end of the day, the question is, was this ever going to happen? That's kind of what Rubio and Trump push is this was, they were planning and doing all this. Well, there's no evidence to that effect. It seems that there's nothing to suggest it would have if you hadn't illegally murdered people in their country. It's hard to say, though.
What they're doing. On top of that, by the way, they're using drones and missiles immediately. When they heard Mr. Trump announce what he was doing with, what is it again, Project Freedom, they decided they were going to do what they had threatened to do all along, and that is use their missiles to take out whatever's there that's trying to enforce this for the United States.
So all that means is the illegal blockade that is illegally blockading the area, right? So if they were, on top of all of that, there's no way you could even frame that as something illegal or a crime. You're talking about military vessels engaged in a act of war, which is an illegal blockade. So if they even were to, attack them, it would be within the war that they're currently fighting. It's an interesting way to frame that. But either way, continuing, Iran says from their mission to the UN in New York, the only viable solution in the Strait of Hormuz is clear: a permanent end to the war, the lifting of the maritime blockade, and the restoration of normal passage. Now, remember, had they taken the deal that Iran had offered before they killed Khamenei, for example, they would have been able to go back to a time where they didn't have a toll and Iran controlled the Strait. It would have gone back to the way it was before, which is effectively, arguably nobody controlled it, but the U.S. would muscle around there the way they would everywhere else. So in this case, they effectively created a situation where they lost what they claim they now want. But Iran is now saying that's the solution. We'll go back to this, but with the new things we've added because of what you did. Instead, the U.S. is pushing a flawed, politically motivated UN Security Council draft resolution. That's what Rubio is just griping about. Under the pretext of, get this, guys, freedom of navigation. Freedom of navigation. While they are bombing ships that they don't agree with, that you never verify are doing anything wrong, and quite literally doing this kind of thing all over the world. So, look at what you guys are doing in blockades with Venezuela. Look at what you're doing in Yemen. You guys have been starving them for decades. Look at what you're doing in Taiwan. It's embarrassing for them to pretend like they care about freedom of navigation. No, they just like to use these things when they need them. They'll break it every time they can. They'll violate everything they want to. And it says, to advance a political agenda and legitimize unlawful actions not to resolve the crisis. Now, yes, this is Iran's mission saying this, so you should be critical of it, but remove the Iran point. Just put this on a piece of paper somewhere. It's exactly the reality. It matters that they said it, but you have to understand that just because it's said by a side doesn't mean it's not also the truth. You should question it, verify it for yourself. But what you can literally prove for yourself shows you that this is embarrassing, that this would have been the case, because here's what's even funnier about it. To argue this is Iran propaganda is insane, because this is now what the U.S. says they want. So they're basically going, yes, we agree, but we're not going to give you what you think. We're not going to allow you to get what you wanted before, even though you've lost. That's how they would argue this. Iran calls on member states to act on the basis of logic, fairness, and principle, not pressure, reject the draft, and refrain from supporting or co-sponsoring it. Now, who knows? You'd like to believe there's plenty of people that were just telling you Israel and the U.S. are committing genocide that might be like, yes, this is the same agenda. It's hard to say. There's pressure. There's been a lot has shifted since then. There's been a lot of people moving around and people changing positions because the U.S. and Israel have been trying to put people in place that keep them in power. So Ali Bounama points out what Jeremy Scahill says. First, he says there is intense diplomacy, exchange of amendments on a potential memorandum of understanding between Iran and the United States. The entire process is a damning indictment of the fact that this was a war of choice by the United States. A deal could have been reached in February or much earlier, and much, much, much earlier. But I'll include this again in case you guys want to read the article about how we know that they had agreed to this, because the foreign minister of Oman, who was in the negotiations, publicly spoke with corporate media and said, yes, they agreed to give up their nuclear program. They agreed to give up their enrichment. All the things they claim Iran refused to never do, but they told you they would. That's why I told you they lied about it. They didn't say they thought they were lying. They said they never said it, but they did. And Israel bombed them when they finally agreed to it, because Israel didn't want them to do this, because then they didn't have an excuse to go after them. And realize we're talking about a civilian program. Monitored, not nuclear, not missiles, not bombs. It's just so exhausting. Trump will try to manufacture, Scahill continues, a claim of victory for putting out parts of a raging fire he started. But the fact is, Iran inflicted a level of damage and displayed a resolve that stunned Trump's administration, and they have failed to find a way out. I agree with this. I've been saying this for months now. Pretty much, early in this conversation, this is something that we were discussing based on, I think, like 4 consecutive lies in a row. And it's only been one after another since then, right? So it's pretty clear, if you were allowing yourself to see how easily they were lying to you, that you saw that. But even in the beginning, I said the same thing. I said, well, that doesn't mean they're losing, but you can clearly show that what they're claiming isn't true. I'm now at the point where the same thing applies, but all of it together, I think it's objective. These people have lost what they tried to accomplish. But as you know, they could take this a step further if they truly wanted to be that belligerent. It says, despite the assassination of its senior leadership, both military and otherwise, by the way, like don't forget, Khomeini was the equivalent of them, of Iran murdering the Pope or any other religious leader in this country, you know, whatever it's about. It's a non-military target. In fact, a religious leader. Just imagine what they would do if that was done to somebody in Israel or in the United States. Despite the assassination of its senior leadership, Iran engaged in organized, sustained retaliatory strikes, easily verifiable, and its government remained intact and in power, despite what Trump keeps lying about. The promised uprisings or regime collapse never materialized. Iran used asymmetric tactics to create severe crisis in the Strait of Hormuz that the U.S. could not defeat, culminating in the failed Project Freedom farce. Now, when he says asymmetric tactics creating a severe crisis, I would argue what he's pointing to is that was done to them. Like that was done, and the global repercussions were exacerbated by, I argue, U.S. and Israeli interest to create what they thought it would happen, but did not. That Iran would just be belligerent and step in and be the terrorist and control everything and bomb everybody. Didn't happen. That, I guess they're projecting what they are. So here we have a situation where they created a crisis, but for their interest, for their global influence, for their energy production. You know, that's what I think we're talking about. And it says that the U.S. could not defeat, culminating with the failed Project Freedom. Nothing is guaranteed, and the U.S. twice bombed Iran while claiming to be negotiating. More than that, in fact, if you go back before now, that could happen again. But time is not on Trump's side. The U.S. will have to make concessions that Trump swore he would not. This is not going to end with Iran's unconditional surrender. I agree. He says, as we recently reported, Iran submitted amendments to the 14-point proposal to agree to a framework to end the war. The U.S. has since responded, and Iran is in the process of responding to that. Here is how this round is going. Now, this is 14 hours ago. What we're going to end with today is what Iran ultimately says about the larger process, which at the end of the day, 14-point plan, what we're essentially talking about is adding on to what they're already demanding. It's really important to understand how flimsy this has become for the U.S. government, and in any way they can try to make this about them getting things from Iran when it's just not what's happening. Not as far as I can tell, but how it ends will give us a lot more information. Here's Rubio.
A gallon or $8
Oh, wait, actually, hold on. I forgot. There's a point I wanted to make from this one. Hold on. It's really a small point, but I just want to make sure you guys saw this because Ali Boonma made a good point here. And just, referencing what directly affects individual Americans, right? As he says, time is not on Trump's side. Indeed. National average gas prices are exploding. And this is actually, actually, I was looking at the wrong one. So yeah, right now, premium, in California, over $6. What he's highlighting here is that to the individual American, whether or not you are on the side of, Trump or not, these things are directly affecting your life. And that is always the biggest issue, because most of these things in the past have been some distant thing that haven't been in our face, which is disgusting, seeing as how your tax dollars or our tax dollars are paying for these things. We should care. But now it's affecting people that even support Trump. And so here is Rubio using that, knowing that Americans are upset because you promised the opposite, basically trying to flip that around and say, but Iran could do it.
About it because they have a nuclear weapon. A gallon, we wouldn't be a gallon or $8 a gallon. We wouldn't be able to do anything about it because they have a nuclear weapon. And a nuclear armed Iran could do whatever the hell they want with the Straits, and there's nothing anyone would be able to do about it.
Okay, so we're talking about a group that doesn't have it, doesn't want to, and the evidence of your government shows that. But so this hypothetical thing that someday in the future, if they may get that they don't want and aren't trying to get, they may be able to do what you're doing right now. Got it. So if what you're saying is they may be able to put our gas price at $8, what you're doing, they may be controlling the Strait with their blockade, what you're doing, you're essentially saying we can't let them do what we're doing. Okay, so from the American perspective, what you're saying is that's a bad thing that they might be able to do. Okay, so why wouldn't we go, we care about the thing doing it to us now, not the thing you claim might do it later, despite the evidence that suggests it's not going to happen. Why can't we recognize stuff like that? These people are doing what they claim Iran might do. Doesn't that make them the terrorists? Doesn't make them the bad guy? Pretty much, based on their own narratives.
And that's one of the many reasons, apart from like the massive loss of life in a nuclear strike, why Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. I mean, so this is an
This is the only country in the world. This is the country speaking, and it's the only one in the world that's used them on civilians.
example of if they had a nuclear weapon, they close the straits and they would tell the world, what are you going to do about it? We have a nuclear weapon. We can attack you with it. That's the world none of us want.
Guess what? They restricted you from the strait already, and you seem to not be able to do anything about it. So apparently it doesn't make any sense to talk about nuclear bombs when they're doing that to you right now. Now, the point would be, though, if you want to make the case, they could do that right now to everybody. Apparently they could do that, and you still wouldn't be able to stop them. So what difference do we to make them add on some hypothetical bomb that they could use? You see how useless and meaningless that becomes when you understand? So this, by the way, in a way, is sort of making their case, though. They're saying, well, Iran might do, well, guess what? So could anybody. So could the U.S. government right now, anywhere, or especially in these choke points. Why? So by your logic, why do we allow you to have nuclear weapons if you could do the same thing? So the only difference comes down to because we say Iran bad guy. That's it. Because they're bad. And so we can't do, they're just bad. They can't have weapons and things because they're just going to do bad things while you're committing genocide, while you're working with the most obvious corrupt government in the world. You know, but it's just painful. And I'm of the mind that people see this more than ever.
To leave behind. It won't happen under this president's watch, but some future presidents.
You mean aside from it happening right now? Got it.
And future, you know, in the future, Americans will have to deal with this. So just one more example of why these guys can never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. $8 a gallon.
I mean, you realize in this statement he repeats that 7 times. So the thing they don't have, they're not seeking, that your evidence shows they don't have. Like, this is just, if you're in this room, there should be not a single one of you that do not stand up and repeat the same question until the end. Why do you keep claiming that when your evidence suggests it's not there, when you've never proven that, whenever? I mean, there's nothing to make that case. In fact, everything we have shows the opposite. And yet they just keep yelling it. Trump makes it about every single point because, well, the nuclear bomb, you kids would be dead if they had a nuclear bomb. It's because they're desperate. You know, you can see it. You know, you can feel it.
President Trump has said, and the facts.
So here's what Trump says. Same point. And it's just become all or nothing now, right? That it's worth it, even if it's all the way up to there. Why? Because, well, we stopped them from having a nuclear weapon. No, you didn't. But if that's your only argument, well, then apparently you've already lost. Apparently you have nothing you can say here. Oh, wait, I don't think I grabbed it. Hold on. It's only 19 seconds. I mean, here, I'll do it real quick since I referenced it. I think I was just going to read the statement. It is what he said, but I'll grab it for you right now. And so what I, just as always find so silly about this is that at the beginning of this, your whole thing was about lower prices and your gas won't be as much as with Biden. And now it just has become, well, because we did something you said you want, it's okay that we don't get what you promised us. How's that work out? Well, it works out because that's every politician my entire life ever. We're going to give you all these things. And then it comes to the time to give them. Well, we can't because of this thing, or because they stopped us, or because blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what is the consistent factor? You don't get what you were told you were going to get. It's amazing how Americans can't come to terms. Well, I'll take that back. I think they are. But some people, how they can't come to terms with that obvious reality. Here's the clip.
And we're up. The stock market's higher now than when we started this war. And
I said, it's Americans don't care. 99% of Americans do not care. I mean, it didn't care a long time ago. Now with the wealth gap between, where there basically is no middle class, I guess we just don't even talk about that anymore. It doesn't matter, guys. 401ks and the Dow. Yeah, there are people that care. But the vast majority of Americans, which is what you're claiming that represents as a positive thing, don't care. Don't have stock, don't have 401ks because they're barely being able to pay their rent and get gas in their car. But, keep telling us how we're succeeding because your wealthy friends are benefiting off of your insider information.
I thought oil prices would go to $200, $250. It's at $100 now.
He didn't think that. He said he keeps acting like that. Before the conversation was over $100, historically would be a big catastrophe. Then before this, it was a little bit, but the point was this idea of he thought it was over 200. If you thought it was going to be over $200, that means you thought that this whole thing would destroy this country. But apparently it didn't happen. So I guess we lucked out. This guy is a fool. If you believe that's what he actually thought, so he's either lying to you because he's failing, or he just admitted that he was willing to collapse this country for a gamble.
And I think you're surprised, and I'm surprised. But even if it went to 200,
And so he even said he's surprised. I'm surprised it didn't go that way. I can't believe we didn't fail in that way, but you are, though.
it would have been worth it. I understood that. We had just said
All right. It would have been worth it anyway because of whatever you pretend you've done so far. Now, for the insider information, which is something you've all seen. I just think it's important to make a point about, which I've referenced, but just to make this really obvious, guys. I mean, so this is a guy named Luke Groman pointing this out, founder, president for, Forest for the Trees? Oh, I like that. That's an interesting name. Unfamiliar. Professor, he says, don't you find it curious that a new U.S.-Iran peace deal leaks almost every time the 10-year UST yield breaks 4.4% on the upside? Now, I'm not even that versed on the financial side, but the point is, whether it's his point about when this happens specifically based on the percentage, the yield breaks 4.1%, or simply just every Friday before these markets to make sure that there's a certain manipulation, or that you can see the people betting on either side of it who have inside information. He goes, actually, if I think about it, I don't find it curious at all. If you look at it, what it means is that simply they recognize a moment when this will benefit them and they pull the trigger. And that Trump comes out and makes a statement that we know is false, that you can prove is false today. They're begging to make a deal. Oh, they're fine. They're, and like he just said today, we're going to roll this back because they're now talking to me and getting closer to a deal. According to Iran, that's not true. Jack Journey says, you're telling me the Mossad officer in Unit 8200, Barack Ravid, which is the reality here, writing for American News Axios, might not actually be writing in good faith about the Iran peace deal? He's making a joke, obviously. Mint Press News writes about Israeli spies writing in American News. Barack Ravid is like basically the sole source in Axios who keeps drifting these arguments forward. Now, as the Kabisi letter writes, according to our analysis, $920 million worth of crude oil shorts, meaning they're basically betting on the price going down, were taken 70 minutes before the Axios report claimed, which is not true, that the U.S. and Iran were near the 14-point deal plan. Okay? Almost $1 billion of shorts 70 minutes before. And this is consistent, guys. At 3:40 a.m. Eastern today, nearly 10,000 contracts worth of crude oil shorts were taken without any major news. It's a big deal. This is equivalent to about $1 billion. At 4:50 a.m. Eastern, 70 minutes later, Axios reported that the U.S. is close to mention their memorandum of understanding. By 7 a.m., the oil price had fallen over 12%, with these crude oil shorts gained approximately $125 million. Minutes later, Iran launched the Persian Gulf Strait Authority and oil surged 8%. And how much you want to bet? Those people bet for the reverse side of it too. This is a game, and they're using what they claim they're like. Let's look at it this way. They're using human life. They're using things that affect your daily life, what your prices are, whether food comes that day. Like, these are big things they're doing, which you guys all know. I don't need to tell you that. We've talked about supply chain issues and what they've been doing. This, to me, in addition to the individual agendas that I think are playing a factor here, is a part of the larger transition, guys. Saeed Mamrandi points out, Axios is a tool for White House market manipulation. The Islamic Republic is fully prepared for a potential major attack before Trump's trip to China. And he says, Trump, Witkoff, Kushner, and their cronies have made a lot of money over the past few hours from the fake news they fed to Axios for publication. So what we're dealing with. Noodles says Axios reported an Iran deal as imminent 5 times. 5 times in 19 days. 5 times, no deal. Why does the same story keep coming from the same reporter? Gee, I wonder why. His name is Barack Ravid. Deep sources in the White House and Israeli intelligence. Every time the administration needs to pressure Iran or move oil, Ravid gets the call. Is he reporting news or delivering a message? $760 million in oil shorts. Now, this one said more than that, but they're different platforms, different perspectives. I understand that it's about close to $1 billion. Placed 21 minutes before the April 20th Iran announcement. Oh, that's what he's doing. I forgot. I'm sorry. He's pointing back to the previous one. Didn't write the other number. The point is before. So, and this is this is the reality. And this has been called out by even mainstream platforms to some degree. Major bets right before major moves. Yesterday, Trump paused the naval operation Hormuz. Markets rallied, but 0 U.S. ships crossed the strait. Iran says they have not even yet begun. Iran wants 5 years of enrichment. U.S. demand 20. I mean, the point is they're going back and forth in this. Half the stuff we're told about what they're going back and forth on is a lie. I'm still of the mind that Iran is not budging on what it's asking for. Why would it? It has all the power right now, it seems. Now, as this person highlights, according to Barack Ravid, the U.S. and Iran are the closest point yet to getting a deal. And as Glenn Greenwald points out, the, quote, former, because he is, but in quotes, because I don't believe they ever really are former Israeli spy and IDF soldier, Barack Ravid, has spent 15 months serving as the main propaganda arm for Netanyahu and Trump on Iran. I mean, this guy's literally part. I mean, you know how often we talk about Unit 8200 connected to all these intelligence things, all Palantir and all the different tech and spyware. This guy who's been leading this story and lying to you the entire time is a former Unit 8200 member. It's just so silly, isn't it? He recites the same story over and over. The U.S. and Iran are very close to a deal. Twice that reporting has been used as a ruse to attack Iran. The Iranians obviously trust nothing that comes out of his mouth. Only CNN and various Zionist types do. But this is the same SHIT over and over. Iran is about to surrender, turn over its nuclear dust, etc. The actual negotiation far more closely resembled Obama's Iran deal, with a couple added features to allow Trump to pretend to his followers that he won something. I couldn't agree more. And so what he's essentially highlighting is it's basically reverting back to the very deal Trump broke before, which amounts to him failing in every discernible way to what he said when this started. But watch as he tries to turn this into a win. Here's what he says. This is today. Assuming Iran agrees to give what he has agreed to, or what has been agreed to, assuming that's even the truth, which does not appear to be the case, which is perhaps a big assumption, the already legendary epic fury. How sad is that for him to always try to hype his own thing? It's just kind of embarrassing. Will be at an end. Okay. Epic fury is at an end. But I mean, here's what's hilarious to me. That was the previous 60-day conversation, but you already told us you've ended that. That was terminated. And now you're moving on to Operation Freedom and allegedly gives you a whole new 60. No, it doesn't. That's not even true. You violated from day one. You never even met the requirements for the first War Powers Act conversation. But now you're saying the already legendary epic fury will be at an end. Will be? I mean, will that right there be used legally in a court of law to argue he just said it wasn't? I mean, probably not, but it says if they don't agree, the bombing starts. I mean, this is so ridiculous. I mean, that could have been the statement from every single day over the last 2 months. Every single day. Trump will go, if they better not, or I'll do something. We'll bomb them if they don't make a deal. Every single day. Here we are again. But I thought you just said you were making peace. And it says, and it will be, sadly, at a much higher level and intensity than before. How many times can you make the same statement with like a few different adjectives? It'll be like you've never seen. We'll destroy your entire civilization. We'll take all of, openly telling us you'll bomb infrastructure. How do you not see this as weakness, especially after so many times in a row? Trump, again, threatens to resume bombing on Iran, Scale points out, if it does not agree to a deal, writing it will be sadly a much higher pace. But CNN, of course, because they're adversarial and hate Donald Trump, they back up his narrative. Does that make sense, right? As Glenn points out, they're really the ones that seem to support the Barack Ravid Zionist narrative. But aren't we told they're just like doing anything they can to go after Trump, except they constantly back up his narrative when it comes to Iran and Israel and war? What do you know? Iran reviewing U.S. proposal, as source says, both sides moving towards a memo to end the war. Trump says is what that should read. Now, Mel points an important point out in this, and the Gray Zone on May 5th highlights this. By the way, the Foundation for Defense of Democracy is it's one of the most Zionist organizations in this country. That's Elliot Abrams sitting there. That's Elliot Abrams from the previous administration, from Trump. Got one of the most, but he's a John Bolton level element here, involved with the Venezuela manipulation. I mean, and this guy's involved with the conversation of the new guy they're going to have to negotiate with Iran, by the way, from a group that's literally lying to you for Israel. And she says, so apparently Jared Kushner made the decision to remove J.D. Vance from negotiations. I guess apparently because this unelected guy who's totally working for Israel gets to decide whether the vice president's involved. Doesn't that feel weird? Well, and he replaces him with this guy. In early January, Nick Stewart literally wrote an op-ed advocating for this war, and every single prediction he made about how things would go turned out 100% wrong. This is the guy they're bringing in to help with negotiations. Look at that. Great job, Twitter. I wonder why you don't want us to look at the information. That's not a joke. Look at that. There it goes. The window is opening on Iran. Here's why America should act now. So a guy who's supposed to be negotiating is a guy who's literally advocating for the war in Iran. And it says Trump's new Iran negotiator is an Israeli lobbyist who has denounced negotiations with Iran. You can't make this stuff up. They've literally now put a guy in place to negotiate with Iran who previously denounced that they should be negotiating with Iran, who lobbies for Israel. Guys, it's just that obvious. And Zero Hedge, of all platforms, by the way, everybody at some point starts to call it out because everybody sees it. Iran pours cold water on the deal euphoria. What U.S. media outlets are pushing about the details of the negotiations does not reflect the reality of what's happening, says Iran. Now, as always, because we don't know yet, tomorrow, the next day, we'll find we don't know. Iran could be lying. Based on every single one of these before, it seems likely they're not. Especially since it's not in their interest, especially since they seem to be in control, especially since Trump and his administration have lied about every single one of these statements. So we'll find out. But at the moment, what appears to be the case is that Iran is going, that's not true. According to this platform here. And this is a translated translation, so it's on the side, but a simple point is, where was it? Oh, I think it's already moved a bunch. I had it lined up. Running for a minister, the American proposal is still in study in Iran. That was earlier. Bottom line is that you read through these, and it's very clear what they were saying is that this is not the reality. That ultimately, right now, at the best, that they're still talking, and understand, based on what Iran has said, which as I've very clearly put out that I think there's an opening in which Iran would just simply capitulate to some degree because they've always shown restraint and willingness to come to the table. And maybe they're going, fine, come on, we'll make a deal, but we're not giving these things up, and we're still going to end up with control over the strait. But still end up I guess what I'm saying is Iran could truly put its foot down right now, the way I see this, and just can refuse to give anything to Trump that allows him to pretend like he got some kind of a win. But and they really could, and I think they would even succeed in that way. But what that opens the door to is what Israel might do, what even the U.S. government might do if really cornered, or Trump, if really cornered with some kind of accountability. So instead, from a not belligerent entity, which is what I think we're dealing with here, you make the decision to go, okay, maybe we give Trump something. Maybe we let it, maybe we go back to the deal about, we give him the JCPOA again, because you know what? We're not even seeking a bomb. We don't want one. So we let him pretend he got us there, even though we already were there. And then we gain everything else. And then we release that steam valve, and Trump's not piping to go after us right now. I can see a world in which for them strategically, they would go in that direction because that's a win for them, even though Trump would claim he won. But I'm not sure. I feel like they murdered their religious leader. They clearly have a lot to deal with, and their people would not want that, I would argue. But so back to the point, as we're at right now, I'm of the mind with all I just said that what they're dealing with is the original same points they're demanding, and that Trump has to adhere to those or we're not talking. And what they did is come to the table, and they're now going, okay, we'll give you this, but here, then they're at a 14-point plan where they're adding other things in that make that line up. That's just my opinion. It's hard to say. Because right now, people like Scahill and the rest have, people they're in contact with, but even then, it still seems to be slightly up in the air. So we will have to see what happens over the next couple of days. But the reason I'm obviously saying that is because I don't see why they would give in to a group that's been so belligerently violent against them for unjust reasons when they have the ability to say no. It says progress has been made in the talks with Washington through Pakistan, but it has not reached a level that would lead to an agreement. The negotiations are forced on ending the war, not the nuclear issue. which is what Trump keeps claiming it's all about. So how embarrassing would it be for him to not get that? The negotiations still facing intransient American approach and excessive demands. So keep up on it. We will as well. Golubov. Remember how funny, how silly this all is. Remember, this is the guy they told you he was a defector. Trump was working with him. I'm still convinced they tried to get him killed. I think they thought that he would get killed because they think Iran's our monster, and they didn't. They called his bluff. He also said all these ships went through with oil. I mean, do you realize that not only would we be able to prove that by GPS, but we would see the influx in the oil market? I mean, why do they think we would fall for that? 8 to 10 tankers full of oil? Really? This guy now came out and said today, Operation Trust Me, Bro, failed. Now back to routine with Operation, what is that? Faxios? What is that? Like faux something, like fake. I don't know. I'm not sure what he's implying there, but I think at the end of the day that they're ultimately failing, or blustering is what I take that to mean. But so this is later in the day today. So how can it be that they are making a deal and we're so close when these people are going, we're back to what we were doing before? Again, I think you already know. Now I'm just going to go ahead and skip most of this just to finish. But what this is to show you, with everything we just went over, and especially since right now, after what, this is a post from 2 p.m. Now it's, for me, 9 p.m. You can see that these things aren't the truth. So think about how crazy it is that we live in this situation where you have all of these people, this one's Gunther Eagleman and all the rest, who not just are wrong, but near consecutively are wrong, are coming out every day and screaming a thing that literally shows to be false the next day. And every day they do that. And not only do they not get decrease in engagement, but it gets higher and higher and higher. Now, that either means one of two things. That either means that all these people truly don't even care about the truth, and it's just about entertainment. There is a factor of that. But I don't believe that's the majority of this platform or conversation of the human users. But I was just lost my thought there for a second. Oh, so yeah. So the point is that these people are lying so often. How does that affect their reach? So it's either that everybody's like that, or the platform is gaslighting for the narrative. The platform is making them benefit from something they need for an agenda, even though nobody believes it. Now, I think it's pretty obvious what's driving this, guys. There's no way that you, in any sense, continue to wildly gain and influence and reach and everything else when you're always wrong, when you're constantly lying. It's not even, I mean, at this point, you can prove it. I've gone through these every single day. So in this case, this is first of all just Trump saying they're making a deal. And they agreed, he says, to give up their uranium stockpile. They agreed to give up their stockpile. Well, they didn't. They just said they didn't. And that's in fact what they promised before. I think this is Trump trying to get back to that original point, which would be a failure at the end of the day. And they still won't even get that, it seems. Bill Mitchell, of all, he says, breaking, is this the deal? President Trump has Iran on the brink of a one-page ending agreement with months of maximum pressure, a 14-point memorandum. Wow, they're all just sharing the same stuff, which isn't true. Iran's accepting a 15-year moratorium. Now, look, tomorrow, the next day, if it turns out that's the case, it'll be pretty much exactly what I was just saying. They would give them something which means nothing because they're ultimately not already agreed to give this up on February 28th, as long as they would get their control over the strait. That would still be a fail for Trump. I still don't think that's the reality. My complete gut. I just do not think that's where they are right now. But we'll find out, right? But what I think is hilarious is these people keep screaming whatever Trump says, even though he keeps getting caught lying. Now, what I just pointed to, though, shows you Iran's side of it, telling you that's not what's happening. In exchange for the United States to remove sanctions and years of aggression, Jared Kushner and Witkoff are leading the American team with strong support from Rubio. No weak compromises. Oh, yeah? You mean except for literally everything being a compromise? These people are just embarrassing to me. And this is the point, guys. This is the same account we were just showing you who posted a video with no audio and lied about what the video was showing, claiming that Biden was being arrested or whatever it was. That's what these accounts do. This one is 393,000 followers. This is my point. This platform clearly benefits anybody who goes in this direction. So he comes out and he says, breaking with a red light. Iran has just officially confirmed they're closing a deal or close to a deal with the United States. This deal includes a 12-year halt. Okay, so what he's doing is repeating all the talking points, all the things they're saying. And then he plays a video of Argacci from an old video of Argacci talking about an old deal from years ago. Now, why would he do that? Why would he do that? Why would he put forth the narrative and then give you a video that makes you feel like it's real because Argacci's talking about a deal that he might make, even though it's an old video that's not relevant to today? Because they want people to believe it. Now, here's the crazy thing. You hear Trump say it. Trump says, I'm making a deal, and they agree. And you get Barack Ravid from Axios that says, they're making a deal, and we are just about to make it. And then you see this, and you go, wow, that's him. He's saying it. You are convinced this is happening, even though it's not. I'm talking about average people who don't understand this is all happening. Think about that. You have corporate media, you got Trump saying it, and then you look and, oh, there's Iran saying it too. Oh my God, it's happening. And this is how crazy it is. You got all these people who like it's hot, like people, this is like that old media point I was making earlier. So-called experts of international foreign policy on CNN and Fox News who actually don't even know what they're talking about right now, who actually think this is what's happening, or many of them that just know they're lying to you. It's pretty crazy. I said false. But of course, we're widely spread this platform and we get no reach with anything we do. John Kennedy comes out and says, letting Iran have a nuke is like giving one to Charles Manson. It's such a tired and meaningless argument because of the same old point that they don't have it, they're not seeking it. But what does this even mean? Why is it bad for Iran to have a nuke? Because you say they're bad. Well, what are they doing in the world that demonstrates they're bad? Well, this and here and that there. Well, most of the things you're pointing to are lies. We'll compare that to what the Israel government and the U.S. government are doing right now. So by your logic, doesn't that mean that the Israel and the United States shouldn't be having? Yes, they're committing genocide. They're the only group that's ever used them on civilians. But by your logic, it's just because Iran is especially bad, despite the evidence that shows that that's not even close to what anything, I mean, as always, compare what they claim and just pretend it's all true. Compare what they claim about Iran. Every single point, assume it's all true, even though it's not. And compare those things to what we know as a matter of fact the U.S. and Israel, even respectively, have done. Not the full picture, because that's insane, but just what we can prove. Or weapons of mass, Iraq, Syria. I mean, go down the list. And you want to tell me that Iran is the dangerous one? It's just this, and this guy's supposed to be the rational one that speaks out, it's unbelievable. Or like I said, I was going to go through this quick, but Eric Dougherty, wow, President Trump has stunned the experts by doing the impossible, openly unifying the entire Middle East. They said it's, nope, or not at all. It's just another narrative screamed on these ridiculous platforms. Breaking now, it says the U.S. and Iran are close to agreeing on the deal. Trump assuming it's the same stuff. It's all the same stuff. All of them are pushing the thing that was said without any due diligence because that's what they do. President Trump has carried out a masterful maneuver, forcing the Iranians to realize we actually don't control the Strait. Trump does, says Eric Dougherty. Clearly evidenced by the fact that it's open right now? Clearly evidenced by the fact that he's controlling it? No. You mean because they begged the UN and Iran to do the show? Just, how do you not laugh at these people? Same person. Red light. Holy crap. Just as predicted, Iran is suddenly becoming more compliant. Iranian foreign minister just visited China and suddenly progress is being made. See, China just said even more so that they're siding with Iran, that they said that they were going to ignore the sanctions of the U.S. government and they let a tanker just go through the strait. And this guy tries to convince you that China convinced Iran to bow to U.S. interests. Come on, guys. And these people grow every single day because this platform uses them. Speaking of that, Mario Nafal says a new poll just showed 74% of Americans believe the U.S. is winning the war. Nobody believes that. Nobody believes that. But that's what you get. Now, there's this weird overlap with Joe Kent. I think it's quite evident at this point. This guy was always some kind of an op, whether he even knows it or not. He's just playing this weird middle counterbalance to like the adversarial to the thing while supporting the thing, kind of. It's exactly what the mainstream media does. It's how they play this. Here's another guy, I'm not even familiar with it, some news Fox guy going, Trump just told me it's all going to happen. Well, good thing Trump doesn't lie, right? Here's another Fox News report saying Iran is betting everything on fear because it's running out of real options. Yeah, that's a fun thing to say out loud, even though there's nothing to back that up and all the evidence shows the opposite. And what fear are you talking about? Oh, you mean all the lies that they're bombing and mines and terrorism? Well, none of that seems to be happening. We sank their boats in hours. Nope, didn't happen. You killed a bunch of civilians. You're proud of that, I'm sure. Kip Harridge, I'm not even sure this guy is, says, my call. He's 51,000 followers. He says, in the near term, the entire world will react in awe at the job that Trump and the military have done in defeating the Iranian radicals and freeing their people from a tyrannical IRGC. He says, and it'll happen soon. Within 1 to 2 months, the IRGC will no longer be in power and the world will be far safer for it. Trump will go down as the global economic and military mastermind. Well, yeah, that's clearly what Netanyahu convinced Trump would be the case. Does anybody see that even close to materializing? I'm gonna keep this off to the side because this is interesting to me. The idea, first of all, how did Syria go? Right? How did Libya go? How did Iraq go? How did any of the locations go where they removed the leadership and put somebody else in place? I can tell you, it went bad. It was terrible. People died and they've never recovered. But let's go ahead and pretend that by doing this now, it'll suddenly work out for them. They don't even care. They don't want that. That's not even in the cards. They're not even trying for that. They want destabilized dystopian locations that they can then use however they see fit. That's what they do. But that's what you get. You get these kind of, expert opinions. Now, a couple last points here. Laura Loomer always ever wants to make herself the story, comes in and says, I'm being targeted by the Iranians, according to the FBI. Oh, great. Kash Patel and Loomer get together. That sounds good. Just putting this on the record in case I'm murdered by the Islamic savages. Scott Ritter says, BS. Your insanity is seen as a force multiplier by Iran. He says, you are part of a process which facilitates the internal rot of America. He says, you're an Iranian asset. The way they want you alive and well and posting your insanity. They need you. Now, to be very clear, I can't speak to his intent. I think it's obvious what he means is not that she's actually working for Iran, but that because of how embarrassing, how completely shockingly stupid she is, and it supports Trump, and they point to her for decision making. Iran's like, exactly. That's the whole, and that's the point he's making. You're more important for them to be here alive because you are the reason people see through this, because of how embarrassing and stupid and belligerent and dishonest you are. That's the point. Scott, I agree with him. Benny Johnson says, Trump says that if Iran does not agree, the bombing starts. Just think about saying this report every time, every day, and you keep saying it, you keep reporting it. Wouldn't you eventually go, I don't believe him this time? Not the Benny Johnsons of the world that just repeat what they're told. And even Sean Hannity says, Trump admin to Iran, your regime of terror is over. One way or another. This is my point. Dying media. I said, is anyone laughing at the dying media? Or is everyone just laughing at them, the corporate media, or is it just me? You have to realize how the dying, at one point, just them saying things meant everything. The world has shifted quite a bit. People no longer trust these clowns. And I don't even mean just him or left or right. It's just the corporate media, the government. People are starting to question these things because they should. And you get a Hannity that comes out and just goes, Trump's narrative, your reign of terror, just like this, the terrorism will never last, our war on your terrorism. People laugh at this stuff today. What you get are the boomer, older following people that still watch media on your, still literally watch on their TV news, or the people who agree with you because that's the team they're on. I don't believe these people have even close to the kind of influence of audience they claim they do. These people are a dying concept. And lastly, just to make sure you don't miss it, here is Netanyahu posting about the destruction of an entire Lebanese city, which is undeniably a war crime. And as Asal Rod says, you're flattening entire villages. You're the terrorist. You just are giving us evidence of your crimes. Asal Rod adds that same point and says, here is a New York Times article that is openly admitting and that Israel said publicly that they are now applying the Gaza model in Lebanon. Now, why would you even say that? Because this is what Israel always does. They want you to know that they think they can get away with anything. And they come out and say it to your face. You know, the very thing that we're saying, that we go, that's what they're doing. And you go, you're a racist. And then they come out and go, that's what we're doing. And then you could even turn around and go, they just said that. Oh, you hate Jews. It's insane. And that's what Zionism is, getting people to pretend that that's the reality when usually, in my experience, the person making the allegation doesn't hate Jews at all. And the person defending that's not even fighting for Jews at all. It's a whole scam to get people to think that's what's happening who aren't even paying attention. Meanwhile, I'm going Zionism in Israel, and they're going, you hate Jewish people. And the middle of the reality, and it's just so, it's such a, I mean, I think it's seen more than ever today. I could be wrong. This kind of thing only makes it more clear. We are doing in Lebanon what we did in Gaza. When you know the whole world understands that was an ongoing genocide. And she writes, like Gaza, Israel's deliberately destroying southern Lebanon to make it uninhabitable for its residents. This is not a model or a playbook. It is a crime against humanity. Drop Site News wants to, this is important because, and we're going to get into this more in depth in a future show, but the Times of Israel released their own. This is my point. Same thing. Why? This is the last thing that Trump and his team want people to see. Israel breaks the story showing you that the U.S.-led Board of Peace, Trump's globalist agenda, told the Gaza Technocratic Committee, which it literally is called the Gaza Technocratic Committee, that's their term, that Israel would no longer be expected to uphold their key ceasefire commitments. Let's take a break for laughter. If Hamas refuses the proposed disarmament framework. Well, first of all, they weren't following the ceasefire anyway. They've been killing people every day. They've been bombing and encroaching and taking territory. But the insane part is that we told you this from the moment this fake deal was put in place. That they even Trump said, well, Hamas has to disarm at some point. Not yet, though. It was so obviously constructed this way for them to turn around and say, well, they're still armed. We took all this territory. We killed everyone we could. And now Hamas is still there and they're armed. So the same thing. Back to square one, apparently. It's just it's the same thing they want you. It's why they want you to think Iran has weapons or nuclear weapons, because it's their excuse to maintain the ongoing agenda. Just like Hamas is the excuse to maintain the ongoing agenda in Gaza, which is why they never really went after their agenda, not Hamas. And on top of that, remember historically that they have given money to Hamas and influenced the group for Netanyahu's own statement, which is to keep them divided in Gaza. But just to miss the point, they're telling you, we don't care. The Board of Peace is allowing Israel to continue, which they already have, the genocide because Hamas exists. That's it. And you know this will be turned into something that is about getting them out of there entirely, which was the entire agenda from day one. And then Trump can pretend he saved him when all he did was destroy the civilization and build some kind of settler movement for Israelis that'll probably call themselves Palestinians once they move in. On top of that, Israel Foreign Ministry says too often violence against Christians in the Middle East is ignored. Yesterday, it happened in Judea and Samaria. That's the West Bank, by the way. And as Saul Rod points out, Israel strikes Gaza church, killing 3, wounding a priest who is close to the late Pope, or targeting Christian locations all around the world, bombing civilian Christian, or rather just Christian churches in Lebanon, bombing them in Syria, bombing them in Gaza, which all existed until they bombed them. And there's still some in those other 2 locations. My point is it pains me to watch them try to act like they care about this. Well, they'll spit at the feet of Christians walking by. Well, they will bomb locations full of Christian churches. Netanyahu's West Bank plan, annexation by law. That's the actual title from Financial Times. Well, there is no annexation by law. It's literally illegal. The words you've looked at for are land theft and occupation, but they're all gaslighting. That's the point, all of them. A pact tracker shows Israel has poured $730 million into propaganda amid reputational crisis. Well, Caitlin makes an excellent point. If you saw a guy spending $730 million on a media operation to manipulate the way people thought about him, or the way manipulate people into thinking that he's not an a-hole, would you reasonably conclude that person, the guy, is an a-hole? The point is, clearly, if your effort is to try to change the way they view you and everyone sees that, maybe we should ask the question, is that's the way they actually are? And the $730 million is try to gaslight you into thinking something else. And I will end with this because it's pretty disgusting to me. Here's what RFK Jr. just said to Trump.
You didn't believe that you were going to get to heaven. You're doing God's work here. You've made peace in the Middle East, which is beyond anybody's imagination.
I can't believe
And
you
now
said
you're
that.
giving millions of Americans a chance to have babies. And you're doing this while the government is locked down by the Democrats. But this
Obviously,
administration has not stopped working for the American people.
And by the way,
That's
as I
because of-
just said, the reason that was still shut down was because Trump didn't get what he wanted. Now, yes, the Democrats played their game too. They both do. It's not about one side. But in that moment, it was what I just told you. He wanted them to give what he wanted in the SAVE Act, which ultimately they're all going to do anyway because they're all doing the same thing. But it was just this small point of just straight up dishonesty. It makes me sick that this guy has the nerve to stand there and tell you he made peace in the Middle East. While I just showed you they bombed Lebanon today. While I just showed you they're currently still killing people in Gaza. But yeah, they made peace in the Middle East. He's a liar. I don't understand how anybody can stand there and not immediately recognize that that person lied to you for his own agenda, whether it's to get Trump on his side for to make sure he got the next thing done, whatever broken thing you'll tell yourself to why it makes sense. They're all the same thing. That this person shows you that now needs to be remembered. I don't understand why he would work his entire life on all these other things only to get here and throw them all away. I don't know. But what I do know is that for him to stand there and tell you that this man is God doing God's work while he quite literally starves people to death, while he bombs innocent children, while he supports the genocidal monster that is Israel's government. I don't know. I don't know how you could possibly take a look at that with a straight face and walk away thinking these people are on your side.
Your energy, your commitment, your vision, and I want to thank you for allowing me to be part of it.
Yeah. And meanwhile, let's go support the COVID shots again that we all pretended we were going to stop. You're all a bunch of disgusting hypocrites. And as Fauci gets not arrested and everybody gets lied to and all the Joneses and the rest continue to tell you everything's going to go great, just support the midterms. It's painful. Now, what I included, as you saw, was this post that I played before. I said, it takes a monster to commit genocide, but it takes a special kind of villain who commits genocide and then names himself a hero. To claim God's favor while starving children to death and incinerating entire families is what true evil looks like. Monsters, all of them. So we'll leave it there today. Now, if you don't want to watch this video again, I've played before, then jump off because it's blurred out, but it's a hard thing to remember. But it's important that we know this is happening, guys. And by the way, I included in this post, which I should have kept up on. There's just something always new in front of me going on that we need to cover. But I was doing this for a long, and also because it just seemed that nobody cared, frankly. But all these documents, a very, very long thread. And the first one at least got somewhat good reach. How many doctors returning from Gaza telling you that Israel is deliberately targeting children do you need to see before something shifts? Apparently one more. Apparently infinite. Because so many doctors, and I'm not talking about the Gaza doctors that would still matter, that you somehow pretend don't matter, or the journalists that you pretend don't matter, but the doctors from all around the world that went there and came back telling you, I watched them kill children. I watched them murder doctors over and over and over and over. And yet apparently it's not enough. I know you guys care, so I'm sorry to say that as if I'm talking. Everybody here is here because you care. But I know you understand why it's so frustrating. But help us, as always. Anybody new? The important reality is that we need to get this information in front of one more person. Your neighbor, your friend, there's somebody else who doesn't yet see it, because that's how we make this difference. That's how we make this thing shift. So I'll leave you with this video of a doctor who saw it, who literally told you, and this is what, from a year ago, telling you that he watched them fire on children and the whole thing, guys. And this is Israel. This is the UK. This is the United States, all supporting and funding and watching this take place, and are now currently getting ready to do the same thing in Iran. They're doing the same thing in Gaza. This is bigger than just foreign policy. But we'll leave it there for today. Thank you for tuning in, guys. I appreciate you. This platform will continue, but we need your support, because we do this because we believe in it. I don't try to find advertising. I don't try to find somebody to, I don't believe in that. I don't, outside of something that I might already agree with, I mean, that could possibly happen, something that something that I actually already use and agree with. But at the end of the day, I'm not even looking for that at this point. I don't want something to be, even if I did, why, funny, quick note on the way out, why that never happens, even the ones that in the past might have been there. Because even if people reach out and say, hey, advertise this on the show. And I go, well, I don't do that. I'll do it. We can make an agreement and we can talk about this and I'll post it on the website. Now we want you to say it in the front of the show. Well, it's not going to happen. Do you realize how few people do that in this field? I refuse to be somebody that goes, by the way, buy this show, buy this shirt, I'll talk about the shirts that we sell. I guess that's sort of a side point for that, but I'm not going to be hucking lotions and skin, and methylene blue and whatever, and having multiple cuts in the show to break down things I'm selling at you. I mean, it just feels wrong, but I guess I could be wrong. I don't want to say that and criticize people that are doing good work out there that do the same thing. I'm speaking for me alone. I feel like it cheapens what we do. And I feel like I don't even want to have this be about you buying something. I want you to believe in what we're doing. I want you to see the use and the need for what this is and believe in it to where you want to make sure this continues. It's like the whole, when we first started this, that was the whole idea. If you build it, they will come, right? I'm going to lean into the fact that I have faith in the humanity and people's good nature, that you guys out there want something good and something honest. I believe what we did prove that, and we're only going to keep going. So I don't know. I digress. Thank you for tuning in, guys. Find platforms you believe in to support. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. That's what it was. Stay vigilant. Remember the video I was going to play. Anyway, on a somber note, I don't want to be laughing as we start this. No, this is a hard video to watch. So understand that this is important and help me change it.
Are you in Gaza?
End of April for the first couple weeks. And then there's sniper bullets. I have children that were shot twice.
Wait, you're saying that children in Gaza are being shot by snipers?
Definitively. I have 2 children that I have photographs of that were shot so perfectly in the chest I couldn't put my stethoscope over their heart more accurately, and directly on the side of the head in the same child. No toddler gets shot twice by mistake by the world's best sniper. And they're dead center shots.
In fact, more than 20 doctors recently in Gaza also told Sunday Morning about gunshot wounds to children. One American doctor told us he even reviewed CT scans to confirm what he saw because he, quote, didn't believe that this many children could be admitted to a single hospital with gunshot wounds to the head. Some shootings have been captured on video.
So, of all the disaster zones you've seen, how does Gaza compare?
All of the disasters I've seen combined, 40 mission trips, 30 years, ground zero, earthquakes, all of that combined doesn't equal the level of carnage that I saw against civilians in just my first week in Gaza.
And when you say civilians, is it mostly children?
Almost exclusively children. I've never seen that before. Never seen that. I've seen more incinerated children than I've ever seen in my entire life combined. I've seen more shredded children in just the first week.
Shredded?
Shredded.
What do you mean?
Missing body parts, being crushed by buildings, the greatest majority, or bomb explosions, the next greatest majority. We've taken shrapnel as big as my thumb out of 8-year-olds.
The UN reports that to date, more than 80% of Gaza's population has been displaced, and the majority of its buildings destroyed. A reality which has taken its own toll on the well-being of children.
What about the emotional wounds?
How can you measure that? I can't measure my own. How do you be an orphan and watching your family, melted in front of you and shredded in front of you? How do you fix that? Ever fix that?
In fact, so many Palestinian children have had family members killed that doctors created a shorthand term, WCNSF, Wounded Child, No Surviving Family.
When were you in Gaza?